One of the men said that he knew of some great places. He introduced himself as Jirold, the head of the Adventurers Guild. They suggested going to a more difficult dungeon, since there were high-level monsters in the east, and a new type of magic was revealed in the new dungeons. Alicia apologized and said that she was not going anywhere. She said she just wanted to be near him and asked for Girolamo. The girl asked if he had called her, and the other thought it was the one who had kissed her beloved. She wanted to know what happened between them that day, and asked if they could be together all the time. Since she was an ordinary administrator and he was an adventurer, Alicia asked him why he would have come here if it weren't for her, and he replied that she asked if they could go out to dinner together. He asked her if she wanted to go to dinner with him, and she said she wasn't exactly keen. The girl said that he was exaggerating and that it was awkward for him to have dinner with such a beautiful girl like her. He asked if she was embarrassed to go to dinner with him, since he was a bit old. The hero said that he could not sell the potions at that price, and therefore asked to arrange everything somehow. She replied that it was like that, and he said that he had just been thinking about his age recently. The heroine asked if this was after a day with her, and he replied that if everything was okay with her, then he agreed, although he was worried, and she was glad that she would finally have dinner with her beloved. He wondered if this was what growing up was. The hero said that he didn't often go to such establishments, but she said that was a lie. He thought that he was constantly going on dates and asking for proposals, and God forbid Suzu would show up here. She graces the cover of the most elite magazine, and the whole world knows about her beauty and heroic deeds. Then she desperately needed help, and he helped her. She rejoined the guild, but as a newcomer, he wanted to please her, take her out to dinner or shopping, and they strolled through his favorite stores. Eventually, she recovered and went on missions again. She's now called the Ice Sword Princess due to her cold personality and fighting style, but underneath it all, she's still the same sweet girl. He said celebrating over drinks is a joy for adventurers, but they need to remember how they make a living. She said they looked like a couple on a date, but he replied that it looked more like a business meeting. Alicia said that it was their first date and asked him if he liked it. He thought that here he was hearing about a date again. The young man thought that now Alicia liked him too, and was this man from heaven? He said that he met her when she was a newbie, and therefore knows her better than anyone. She apologized. She said that during the fight he spat out some kind of black liquid, and that Alicia always talks about her campaigns with enthusiasm. The young man thought that in the past he had also gone into the same dungeons that she was talking about. Jirold thought he was lost, but that's when it all started. He'd never heard of a golem lair. She asked if she was doing well. Luckily for the guy, there were several tasks today that weren't too difficult, and he could choose the right one. He told her that she was not just a gray girl. Others shouted rave reviews about Alicia. She asked if he was interested, and said that she was afraid of falling in love. The young man said that he was afraid because he had just decided to find love, and the relationship with her and Lily was very important to him. He said that he was afraid to change his life, since he had already achieved a lot and was afraid of losing everything, but maybe it was better as it was. She said that when you love, it is not easy. Love also brings suffering. Alicia confessed her love to him. They said that this was their goal, and they needed to pass this tower. The girl cried that her comrades were dead because of their thirst for adventure. She remembered how they sat at the table and thought that now they were gone. The man asked Willie to bring him some water. She was asked if she wanted to go into the dungeon. She was told that if she was still an adventurer, she should definitely go. Alicia said she sometimes desperately needed adventure and someone to call her and wanted to try again. She felt like she was being followed and remembered that adventurers were often pursued in dungeons. She asked Rolado if he was spying, and he said she had misunderstood. The hero explained that he was simply worried about her and wanted to call out to her. She thanked him for his concern and said that her worries had disappeared. She had the opportunity to go into the dungeon and complete tasks alone as a sign of mourning for her fallen comrades. He said that even alone it was hard, and suggested that they stick together since she was constantly exploring the floor with weak monsters. She explained that it was a kind of research to better prepare for more difficult dungeons and not miss any fluctuations. The girl said that she didn't think it was a large sum for an adventurer, and that perhaps the potions were too expensive for his level. He said the last changes were 50 years ago and he had never seen anything like it, so in a way he was lucky, or not. Alicia asked if he was okay, and thought that she was not alone and could not do so much. Jirold said that if she wanted to continue being an adventurer, there would come a time when she would have to go alone, and now was that time. He said that he would be there and help if it became dangerous, and asked to trust him. The hero told her to leave all doubts in the past, grab the sword, and open herself to the future. She coped, but cried from pain. She thought about the pain that had only grown since then, and about how he had been drowning her, then pulling her out. And then someone had extended a hand to her. Alicia said she wanted to be his girlfriend. The girl screamed, and another asked if it was Alicia. Alicia said she saw her kissing him on the observation deck. She said that the data showed that the potions were being sought by relatively new adventurers, and that a report signed by the Information Bureau stated that the shop's profits were not growing for that reason. She asked if he didn't like her and what that aura was. He said it wasn't entirely mutual, and asked how to get her home. She said that she would go, and asked to help her get home. He thought it was even for the best. The girl asked which one he would choose, but he replied that he was not going to choose anyone, since it was difficult for old people to start relationships. She said that he just perceives girls in love as children. That's why he's a virgin. She said that as long as he had money, finding a relationship would not be a problem. But he asked her not to start. The girl asked me to tell Mr. Jirold that she wanted to meet him when she returned from the dungeon. She said she had been told she was not a good drinker, and advised to try not to drink so heavily again. She asked why she didn't remember it, and they told her that she was completely wasted, and got so drunk yesterday that she went after the guild leader in front of Alicia. The sales department insisted on a high price, but their ideal was at odds with reality, so they decided to formally raise the issue at a meeting. The guy said that he would tell you everything later, and that while he was in the dungeon, don't be bored. The girl wondered what they had on their date and apologized, asking to fill out the paperwork for them. The dungeon shook and the mythical mechanism began to work. Such dungeon cities exist all over the world, inhabited by the most terrifying monsters, and adventurers brave the dungeons day and night in search of treasure. There are currently no prospects for lifting the dungeon blockade. People were worried because their friends had ended up in the dungeon, and they asked for at least some information. The exploration of the first floor of the dungeon has been completed, but the results are completely different from the data they obtained earlier. It was a dungeon vibration. He ordered that all adventurers be informed to be extremely careful, as there was a possibility of powerful monsters appearing, and asked if anyone had returned. Only the group that was on the first floor returned and reported what had happened. The girl said they needed to send the rescue team immediately, but he asked if she thought that was right. He said he had been reborn, and this was his second life. Several hundred years after his first life, the gods granted him rebirth into an ordinary family. The research department is now trying to understand the structure of the oscillations, and they expect that the oscillation may occur again. The girl cried that if they waited until everything was figured out and investigated, Suzu would die. He said that he understood and that many adventurers were currently left in the dungeon. Among the missing were Suzu and Alicia. The girl cried because she couldn't let her childhood friend die. She was told there was a theory that if you were stuck in a dungeon, you could survive for about 3 days. Adventurers typically stock up on supplies and essentials, but survival rates have plummeted since then. 2 days had already passed since his hesitation. He recounted how he had once gathered adventurers to help the missing, and the rescue team had perished. Most were killed by goblins and ogres, even low-risk monsters. A dungeon without collected data is a dangerous place. One of the guys asked what was wrong, Alicia, but she said no. It seems that the ogres are already starting to come out here, and they have decided to continue exploring. He said that in the past, or rather, in a past life, he was an adventurer, and as a reward from the gods for defeating the dungeon boss. It's already the second day of hesitation in the dungeon, and they're constantly encountering monsters. They don't have enough strength and energy to hold out for long. They found a ladder and decided to wait for rescuers near the landing, as it was not worth going into the unknown. He said the stairwell area was safe and could be used for about 7 days if a disturbance occurred. Within 7 days, the guild would be able to reach the missing, but they decided to continue, saving supplies as much as possible. She thought exploring the dungeons without accurate information was too dangerous, since they couldn't get out of here standing still. The guy told Alicia not to be afraid and to pull herself together. The girl said that it made sense to move while they could, and they decided to start searching to save time. One of the guys shouted at them to go back to the stairs and hide there for 7 days. The boys heard a woman's voice. Suzu, whose leg was injured, was running. The guy told her not to help her, she was a dead man. They decided not to look at her and leave. Alicia thought about Girolado and asked what she should do. Another man said that he was so busy with work that he didn't have a single girlfriend, and he was the youngest person to ever become a guild leader. The man never married, lived by his work alone, and had no interest in girls. And only at the age of 40, when he was appointed head of the guild, did he realize something. The heroine brought food from the guild leader. The girl said that the guild leader was so kind and asked for help carrying the treats to the loading platform. He said that he was able to help them and asked her to stop crying. She prayed for her beloved to return safe and sound, and he asked her to wait for him. The girl shouted that she could help her and remembered her friends. She used accelerate. The girl said the door was open, and it was her fault. The other girl said she couldn't see the underwear anyway, and she said she felt small. She said they would go to the hotel, start undressing, and then these crappy panties appeared. The other girl exclaimed that they weren't going to go to the hotel at all, but she said they would have a chance and brought her something. She said that their relationship would go to a whole new level, and she said the name Jirolda. Having asked a friend for help, he spent almost the entire last year trying to find a girlfriend. The girl exclaimed that it was terrible, and asked if this was what she had spent the money on. And she replied that it was her thing. They asked if it had been rebuilt elsewhere and if there was any information about the vibration. They realized they were in trouble because the map was no longer useful, and they, who had been on the second floor, found themselves in the 10th, or even the 20th. Suzu said that it was enough laughing and that they needed to cool down and do something. The other girl suggested they move on and hurry up. Suddenly, a monster appeared. The girl thought she was having so much fun and wanted adventure. She thought that her adventures would end here. Alicia said that everything would be fine, and there were no more monsters. She told the girl that she was covered in blood and needed to take a health potion. The girl recognized her as the porter's daughter. One of the guys said that she was already dead, and she was saving her, and asked why the hell she was climbing here. The maid said that middle-aged men have a hard time in love, and that he wouldn't succeed. He said that she was an adventurer, not a goblin, and would not die so easily, and that he could take advantage of her helplessness. The girl screamed that no way, and told him to get rid of the potion, as she needed help. He replied that one potion would not save her, since she had lost a lot of blood, and that they themselves needed potions to survive. She said that as long as there is an opportunity to save someone, she will save them. That is her principle. The guy asked her if she had heroism syndrome, and told her to put her principal somewhere far away, saying that even though she was the head of the team, this did not give her the right to decide for everyone. She said that he was the leader, and she was in charge of the medicine, and that there was a man lying there dying, and he was doing nothing. She said she wanted him to give her that damn potion, or she would force it out of him. Alicia said that in that case they were saying goodbye here, since she couldn't trust such selfish and self-confident people. She told them to leave, because they couldn't cope here alone and would die. The girl asked him why he wasn't going with the team, and he replied that he was. The girl doesn't know if he had a date, but she understood everything at first sight. She said she had simply made that decision and asked if he wanted her to help. She said she was so scared. The heroine introduced herself as Alicia and said that it seemed like they had met before. She explained that they came to the stairs because it was the safest area, unaffected by the vibrations, and monsters did not approach it. Another girl asked if the guild leader had come up with this strategy by accident, and she replied that she had guessed correctly. She explained that they had been discussing various incidents in the dungeon that evening, and since she was chatting pleasantly with the guild leader, she had guessed. The girl thought that she trusted the chief very much. She cried because he never answered her, and wondered if this was their last meeting. Alicia sat on the steps and thought that she just wanted to see him one more time. They asked what they should do in his absence, as he was feeling unwell. Another said he had never been sick, but now there was an emergency due to the fluctuations. He is already quite old, and he treats girls almost like children. The girl added that such a guy doesn't have a single chance of getting a young and energetic girl. The boss left the assignments for today, and they decided to notify the information department and the sales department, and also to order that everyone receive the assignments. The girl thought that God blessed the one who gave her hope. He said he now fully understood the horror of hesitation, and decided to move on. He remembered how, while talking to Lily, the last rescue team was killed by goblins and ogres. He then sent a fluctuation research report to the guild, which turned out to be unnecessary because the cycle was too long. But now that report is no longer in the information department. He decided that he would have to fight, since he did not want to waste time looking for a way around. He shouted, "Come on!" The hero thought that he couldn't just die here, and that he wouldn't last long. The girl was surprised that there had once been a report from the research department. He said that at the time he was working in the research department, and although his relationships with his colleagues were not the best and he was called a monster, it was a good experience and he learned a lot. and that's why she can become his girlfriend. She thanked him, saying that because of her selfish request but he replied that there was no need to thank him. He said that he is selfish and these are his selfish actions. The man said that they would definitely meet. He remembered that Alicia had been in the reception area that morning, and he had seen her standing there. He said that he didn't even go up to talk to her, because he was afraid to start a conversation with her, and hid. Jirold shouted that he had given them his word. He asks who was next, and thought that when he ran away from her, he hadn't even thought about what could happen. She wondered if he would demand an answer the evening they met. The man reproached himself for being an idiot, since he knew everyone and should have told her that the adventurers were in danger. And I thought that he was so afraid of losing Alicia. She didn't mind sleeping with him. He thought it would be nice if Alicia left him a clue, and he felt that someone was there. Jirold was glad that someone was still alive and asked if it was a human. He asked about the mass, and he answered. He asked if they knew Alicia, and said that he had seen her when he was going to the dungeon and decided to find out if she had survived. They said it was Alicia's team and that she stayed on the floor above. It was destroyed. One of them said that this arrogant fool had betrayed them and was probably lying there, dying. The other asked if he had any potion with him. He asked what that look was and said he didn't have the potion. The girl thought she shouldn't turn her back on him. The man said that he didn't believe it, and that he would find her safe and sound, and then he would tell her everything. She thought she had dreamed of Jirold, and that she wished she could see him again. Alicia asked Suzu how she was, and realized that she was shivering and burning and needed a medic immediately. But she said it couldn't be free, because she was poor and needed support. She said she had a fever and was sweating all over, and that at this rate she would become dehydrated. She decided she had no choice and gave her some water to drink. The girl came to her senses, and the other asked if everything was okay and how she felt. She said that since she no longer needed help, she could drink some water herself. Alicia thought it was her first time and that this was a kiss. She said it was time to get out. She used accelerate and ran. Alicia fought monsters. She thought she was too exhausted and knew she couldn't move. The girl said that there was no need to worry about her, since she was normal and could quickly get back on her feet if she took the potion. But she suggested taking a break, since she could hardly stand being carried on her back. The girl said that she could die and asked to take off her boots because there was something inside. After the viewing, that evening, the words of the restaurant employee did not leave his head. She said that Lily-chan gave it to her at the guild on the house, and she put it aside just in case. The heroine said that she would use the last skill and put the potion aside for later. She thought that anyone would think she was signing her own death warrant by saving the wounded body on her back, but she would save it for the sake of those who would be waiting for her, and to prove that her decision was the right one. Alicia said that due to the strong vibration, there will be destruction, but they don't have a report, so she can't say for sure. She saw that the stairs had collapsed and she was left to navigate by the groups of adventurers. Suddenly, 2 minotaurs appeared. The girl said that we needed to use the potion. She replied that she would drink it herself, since she was already at her limit and needed to recover, and that she would not regret her choice to save her, even if she died when she got out. The girl asked that if a person gets into a dead end while hesitating, he is finished, and that he should give up, since it is useless to fight. He replied that everything depended on luck, but he would force luck, and this is the principle of every adventurer. He thought that middle-aged men have a hard time in love. Alicia shouted, "Strike!" She thought that if she used lightning at the peak of her physical strength, then death was guaranteed, and she would be able to deal with them while all 3 skills were active. The heroine apologized to Suzu. She said she couldn't do it anymore. The girl said that she did everything in her power. He thought that he didn't regret what he had done, and that he hadn't heard her reciprocate his feelings, but maybe it was all for the best. She thought that Jirold always took care of her, and everything seemed like a fairy tale. Alicia said that she found a team that suits her conditions and is going into the dungeon with them tomorrow. She thanked him for his concern and said that everything was fine, since he himself had given her the advice to find company. She realized that this was not a dream and used acceleration. He once defeated a dungeon boss, and the gods granted him the magic of rebirth. He had wasted his first life conquering dungeons, and all he wanted was for his second, miracle-like attempt. "Mr. Jirold, Lady Alicia would like to meet with you." The heroine said that he was definitely here. Jirold told her to leave the rest to him and rest. He fought with a monster. She said that he had come, and he replied that he had made a promise. The man found them and said that he had been looking for her too and that Lily was waiting for her outside. She said that because of her, Alicia had to abandon her team, but she took care of her and gave her potions, thanks to which she was alive. He said that running to save other people in such conditions was very dangerous, but he admired her actions and that Alicia needed to be given medicine. Alicia said that if she was unconscious and couldn't drink it herself, that meant he'd kiss her. But he replied that he prepared for such events. He said he would inject the medicine directly into the bloodstream with a syringe, and that it would be more effective than drinking it. He said that Alicia was unconscious and she wouldn't be able to walk on her own, and he would carry them. The adventurer Alicia, known as the Ice-Sword Princess, asked him if he wanted to go to a dungeon with her next weekend. Jirold said he didn't want the Guild Master to be seen here, so she should pretend she didn't know him. He said that he had failed to be honest once, and that he was terribly sorry about it, and that it was better for her to be honest. She said there were undead here, and they needed to run past them. The hero used acceleration. He fought zombies. The man thought it was useful to have such a destructive skill, which he received immediately after being reborn. He said he was lucky in this life to have a body, and he could use his fighting skills to their full potential. He should thank the gods for this body in this life. And he said that he was on his way to the stairs when he heard the sounds of a fight, and Alicia was there. She said he was very strong. Alicia said that they were in danger, but were now saved and thanked him. He wondered if she was with him, and she explained that she was the best adventurer in the Tower City and was studying monsters. They saw other survivors who recognized Alicia, the Ice-Sword Princess, and he gave them a new type of potion. They asked him if he minded if they came with him, but he replied that he was a bit busy and they would be on their own. They said that they were ready to follow him to the ends of the earth. Jirold warned that there was a nest of rockmans there and that one should be careful when passing them, as they would not attack if one stayed away from their territory. He thought that this was the first time he had seen these monsters that devoured people, and that the dungeon had now become more dangerous. The man said that adventurers live and die by dreams, and that new adventurers are constantly coming to this dangerous place, and there is only hope. He said he had no choice but to move forward to glory, and that he needed to accept his situation and move on. Others admired his speech, saying that they could not achieve glory if they stood still. She came to and asked if he was trying to cheer up the young adventurers, and he was surprised that she recognized him even with the mask. Alicia thanked the hero. She said that they had once explored a dungeon together, and she thought that it had been a long time since they had done that together. They heard the voices of the rescuers and were glad that they had reached the exit. She said that it would probably be a good idea to wait with the answer for now. Lily was worried and anxious. The boys, noticing the receptionist, asked her to leave it to them and go get some rest. She thanked him and said she'd like to stay longer. Suddenly, a young man ran up to them with big news. They found 7 survivors, and one urgently needed a recovery team. She absolutely had to be taken to the medical center. The men agreed, and a girl turned around. Lily was told that Miss Suzu had a serious injury, but with timely assistance there would be no complications. She saw the main character before her. The girl couldn't hold back her tears. He announced that he had returned and warned them that they needed to hurry. Then, he removed his mask and explained that they first needed to clean themselves up and return to the guild. The man asked Lily to keep an eye on Suzu. The girl was confused, but admitted there was nothing she could do to help her from her bedside, and suggested they return home and support the adventurers from there. The guy adjusted his glasses and agreed. They exchanged brief, understanding glances and continued on their way forward together. Alicia said it was slippery and asked him to be careful. Within a few days, a noticeable bustle had begun to permeate the guild. Conversations grew louder. People were sorting through equipment, and in the corners they were whispering about news and quests. The men, tired yet determined, constantly discussed the work ahead, asked each other about the details of the missions, and shared rumors about the rewards. It seemed that most of the adventurers, as they returned to their normal routine, tried to forget what had happened, dulling the memories with daily busyness. Lily stared ahead silently, her gaze absent-minded and tired, and her soul languished with sadness. At first glance, this was an ordinary adventurers' guild, but beneath the surface lay something far more serious: the fallen adventurers. Of the 892 people in the depths of the dungeon that day, only 16 survived, a statistic that haunted her for a long time. The lively atmosphere of the guild was felt not only by her, but by many others as well. Jirold approached Lily, leaning slightly forward, and then asked if he could speak to her and discuss important matters. She quickly ran into the small building with its shabby facade. There she saw Suzu attentively reading a magazine. Lily, unable to contain her excitement and joy, ran up and hugged her friend tightly, almost bursting with relief, not hiding her tears of genuine joy. Suzu, momentarily at a loss for words in response to such tenderness, nevertheless smiled through her tears, making it clear that she was incredibly glad to be alive. Lily said she'd heard her friend would be discharged tomorrow and apologized for not visiting her all this time. The girl remarked that she probably had enough to do at the guild. Suzu replied that she felt better thanks to the recovery technique. He said that his legs were weak because he was a 40-year-old guy, and she replied that maybe that was true. The girl noted that all this was thanks to Jirold. When she was in danger, he rushed to her aid. She added that from today on, Lilia might start to hate her. Her best friend didn't understand what that meant. Suzu rubbed her short hair and admitted that, alas, she seemed to have fallen in love with the guild leader. Suddenly, hands reached out to her. Lily was glad that her friend also appreciated Jirold's kindness. She was happy. Lily was surprised. She agreed that Jirold was truly cool. Then she asked Suzu if they were now rivals. Even though they had been friends since childhood, she had no intention of hiding her love, and was certain she would become his lover. Suzu shook her head and thanked Lily. However, she noted that she was not going to give in to her friend and squeezed her hand forcefully. Jirold entered the room. He asked what was wrong, looking them over carefully. He entered with a luxurious bouquet. He inquired about what was going on and apologized, assuming they were busy, and he didn't want to disturb them. However, the girls explained that teenagers are very sensitive these days. The guy remarked that he didn't think it was all worth it. Lily suggested that perhaps he misunderstood. Suzu explained that she and Lily were on good terms, but not that close. But with him, they could certainly be. She said she found him very attractive. She expressed surprise at the bouquet and that he decided to visit her while she was ill. The protagonist replied that the flowers weren't meant for that. The girl smiled, but noted that after what happened in the dungeon, she simply owed him her life and was very grateful. Jirold lowered his head and asked her not to worry because he had a good feeling in the dungeon. Suzu didn't understand what this premonition was. She laughed behind him and remarked that she hoped he liked the sensation on her back and arm, addressing him. Lily didn't understand what they were talking about or what had happened. She looked at him angrily and said that she couldn't reveal it. The girl added that perhaps then the girl would hate her friend, but she was very interested. Suzu declared that she wanted to return the bouquet to the protagonist. He didn't understand why. She guessed the flowers were for Alicia, since she owed him a favor. And he probably wanted to please her too. The man agreed. He remembered Alicia and asked where she was. They told him she wasn't in her room, she'd gone to the roof. Meanwhile, everyone went to the cafeteria, but she didn't get much food there. Every day, she left the hospital for food. He hadn't realized the girl liked to eat. When they dined together, she ate almost nothing, and he thought she was losing weight. Suzu remarked that all those girlish tears and efforts to lose weight were in vain. The protagonist understood everything and decided to leave the bouquet in the hospital room. Suddenly, someone addressed Jirold from the side. The girl barely grabbed his hand and screamed. The girl said that he misheard, and that other people say that he is a bit of a delicate guy. She screamed that she was in love with him, and asked him to be her boyfriend. Jirold froze and became frightened. He didn't want to hear that again, and wonder how he had gotten into this situation. The girl told the man that he had been very kind to her, reliable, and that she liked that about him. She wanted to know more about him. He froze and said he was pleased to hear that. The girl blushed and asked him not to look at her appearance, which she considered unsightly. But she asked him to at least try. The protagonist didn't understand. He'd never met anyone who worked at the guild, but he'd always had a positive attitude toward Lily. Suddenly, Suzu grabbed him from the other side and addressed him. She explained that she was in love with him too. The protagonist decided they should discuss this later. He suddenly froze, trying to comprehend the situation. The man asked Suzu if she loved him too, not believing she was serious. Meanwhile, Lily held his hand tightly. Suzu confirmed her feelings, saying she loved him very much. Jirold didn't understand why. She explained that it was because he had saved her, and they had developed such a love. Lily couldn't understand why this was happening now, because she thought it was her time to confess. Her friend replied that she would remind him of her love for a long time. She placed her hand on her chest, saying she'd been advised to be honest about her feelings and not put it off. She couldn't bear the thought of Jirold not being hers, so she'd regret it if she didn't confess now. The boy didn't get the hint. She asked him a question. The man adjusted his glasses and concluded that since this was the case, he understood that he liked both girls. He didn't know what to do. Girls confessed their love to him, each one assuring him that she loved him more than anyone else, and that he simply had to be with them. They told him that if he chose a girl like Lily, nothing good would come of it. The hero was stunned, but then he heard the sound of a door being torn off its hinges. An angry fist appeared in the doorway. It was Alicia, and everyone shouted her name. She sarcastically remarked that they were having very cheerful conversations. She declared that since the girls were confessing their love, she wanted to join in too. Jirold exclaimed that everything was not as she had imagined. He blushed and explained that he just came here. The girl blushed and cried out in tears that she loved him too very much. Lily hastened to explain to Alicia that she'd already kissed Girolamo and that she was his first. She added that he treated her like a princess, but that wasn't an argument. Suzu intervened, claiming that she'd had more experience with him than with anyone else. The man was captivated by her figure in the dungeon. The girls envied her figure. Jirold tried to speak, asking to speak. But Alicia suddenly screamed that she'd made it all up. She announced that, starting from that day on, for a month, they would compete, and in the end, Jirold would decide who would be his lover. The boy froze in surprise. Lily agreed, and Suzu thought it was a good idea. Alicia sealed the deal by noting that Jirold had no objections. He automatically responded affirmatively. Did he recently get a girlfriend and fall down in surprise? All the girls looked ahead resolutely, confident they wouldn't lose. Meanwhile, the protagonist had no idea what was happening, or whether such an important time in his life had really arrived. Red-haired Uru, sipping wine, noted that now 3 girls in love are fighting for the attention of the main character. Dazi expressed surprise that Jiro's silver shield was still intact. A silent Altina suggested that socializing with women would be beneficial, though he himself seemed unaware that he had acquired a harem. The man hung his head, perhaps acknowledging this. He sat with his friends, recalling how he used to dread meetings. They mentioned hearing about the failed matchmaking, orchestrated by Uru and his new experience. He wondered if the others felt the same. The hero hastened to explain that he had done nothing of the sort. Altina asked who he would choose, assuming he had already thought everything through. Jiro nodded, confirming everything that had been said. The girl explained to him the rightness of his choice and the need not to toy with women's feelings, stating everything clearly. DZ completely agreed with Altina. He believed Jiro should be encouraged to hold on to his love, and proposed a toast. They added that Uru wasn't known for her graceful speech, but he would support his words. Everyone raised their glasses. The protagonist thanked him, noticing he'd had a bit too much to drink and decided to wash up. Walking down the hallway, he sensed trouble approaching. He wanted to fall in love, start a family, raise children, and die under the care of his family. This was the kind of ordinary, carefree life he wanted. She asked if he was okay and said she thought he was dating a girl. Suddenly, Suzu appeared next to him in a rabbit costume. She was surprised by his reaction to her outfit. The guy loudly asked if she worked here. The girl nodded, confirming that she had heard about Girolado's weekly visits to this establishment. She rushed towards him, smiling, and asked if he was happy. He didn't know what to answer because she was too close to him. Suzu explained that she was almost there, but the hero did not understand the meaning of her words. She revealed that her goal is for Jirold to learn as much about her as possible, and she considers herself the most suitable for him. She explained that Alicia was strong and beautiful, famous beyond the city limits. And Lily was a sweet administrator, popular, with a large family, who attracted adventurers. Meeting a high-class girl like herself would be a big step for Girolamo. In this regard, she's less demanding. Geraldo replied that he didn't have a girlfriend. He had just recently asked a friend to arrange a viewing for him. However, the guy thought differently, because from his point of view, Suzu had many requests because of her beauty. The girl was embarrassed by such flattery. The man thought she was truly beautiful. Moreover, Suzu struck a chord with him. Young couples were beautiful, but next to them, he felt inadequate. He felt that Suzu would have a hard time with someone like him. She also stated that difficulties don't bother her. She just likes being around him, always. The boy blushed, sweating, and decided not to give in to provocation. Suzu noticed he was blushing as he spoke, which meant she had a chance. The hero explained he'd simply been drinking. Then a colleague approached Suzu, reminding him of the ban on harassing customers in their establishment. The woman apologized. Jirold left her. Returning to his friends, when they asked about his flushed face, he said he'd had too much to drink. The man suggested he might have a fever. He noted that he hadn't given himself any rest since his hesitation in the dungeon. Jirold called the guild. He apologized, citing poor health. They told him he could rest at home. The receptionist understood. Everything was going smoothly, and they should be able to handle it themselves. However, if any problems arose, they would call the main character. If any difficulties arose, it was absolutely essential to contact him. After hanging up, the man was surprised that the work was proceeding without his intervention. He needed to focus on recuperating. He felt very lonely. Perhaps it was a consequence of his weakness. He said he was the least of workaholics who neglected his personal life, and he wanted to have a girlfriend, fall in love, and even get married. The city was silent, but the guild was busy. Alicia climbed the tall staircase and paused before the door. She raised her fist hesitantly, debating whether to knock. The girl was very shy and began to sweat. Suddenly, the door began to open. Jirold came out and asked how long she intended to stand there. Alicia blushed with embarrassment. She was surprised to be noticed. The boy explained that a strange aura had been hovering near his door for about an hour. The girl apologized and explained that she had been at the guild and learned of his illness. The hero was surprised by her visit. He replied that it was a slight cold due to overwork. The girl quickly entered the apartment, declaring she'd cooked something nutritious since she'd bought groceries. The man apologized but said he'd already eaten. Alicia's expression darkened. Then he suggested she just stay with him while he lay down, if she wasn't in a hurry. Jirold took off his glasses. Alicia watched him, impressed. She was surprised by his request. The girl brought a chair and placed it next to the hero's bed. She said she could stay with him tomorrow, today, and the day after. The boy explained that he planned to return to work at the guild the following day. She replied that she was joking and would be there for as long as needed. She added that she still had the key in case she decided to go home. The girl sat next to him and applied a compress to his forehead. Jirold also felt lonely sometimes. The man lay motionless. His sigh alarmed the girl. She blushed. She asked if he wanted to date her. She felt uneasy at the thought that Lily might have kissed Jirold. She looked closely at his face, leaning towards the sleeping guy. He said Alicia's name loudly. He said he had something he needed to ask her to do. The girl listened attentively. The hero confessed that he loved Alicia and took her hand. He extended his hand towards her. She grabbed it and kissed it. Looking at the patient, she explained what she felt. Tears welled up in her eyes. Alicia declared that she had always loved Girolamo and still loved him very much. The man said Alicia's name and closed his eyes. The girl didn't understand right away. She said she always wanted to experience these feelings. Jirold didn't immediately understand what was happening. The girl came closer and kissed him lightly. He didn't immediately realize that it was her first kiss. The hero said that they were too careless. She wondered if his first kiss had been with Lily. He looked away. She reassured him, saying she wasn't angry because he could forget those memories when he was with her. She leaned over and kissed him again. The kissing continued persistently. They were both sweating from the tension. Suddenly the man groaned and stopped, shaking. He noted that everything was wonderful. Jirold quietly said Alicia's name. Looking up, he saw that Alicia had blushed. The girl asked him not to embarrass her. She added that she was capable of doing a lot out of her great love for him, so there was no need to embarrass her. The hero explained that they needed to stop and took her hand. He told her not to move. He said he might give her a cold, and they should continue their relationship when his condition improved. She replied that she wasn't afraid of catching it. They still had a lot of time ahead of them. There was a knock on the door. Lily opened it, inviting them in. Suzu and Alicia greeted Girolamo and asked about his well-being. Suzu hugged the guy, asking if he'd invited her because he wanted to meet. She promised to do a lot of favors if they came to their cafe. Alicia noted that his face was still red, and perhaps he should rest today. Willie objected, reminding them that this was an adventurers' guild and they had to behave properly. She asked why Suzu and Alicia had been invited as well. It turned out they had important business. An invitation to a party arrived from the Adventurers Guild of the Royal City. It was addressed to the protagonist, Alicia, and Suzu. The girls exchanged a thoughtful glance. Lily was surprised and exclaimed why she wasn't invited. Tears streamed from her eyes. The main character approached the house and noticed that someone had come into his house. He inserted the key, carefully opened the lock, and saw someone's legs inside. This surprised him. Alicia was preparing dinner and was delighted to see Jirold back. She said that dinner was ready. The man asked if she was okay. She was a little embarrassed that he wanted to talk. The guy was perplexed. Lily and Suzu appeared behind him. Alicia exclaimed in surprise. The girl didn't understand why they were here. Lily admitted she came because he was tired after work and just wanted to help with dinner. Suzu explained that she'd decided to attack the Guild Master earlier at the guild entrance and had tagged along out of curiosity. It turned out that Alicia had already prepared everything. The main character suggested that they all have dinner together. Alicia explained that she hadn't originally cooked for four, so she blushed and became embarrassed. The man apologized, and Suzu asked for more, noting that 4 servings clearly weren't enough. The girls sat down and praised the prepared food. Lily was surprised to admit that everything was very tasty and suddenly slammed the table. She demanded an explanation for how Alicia had gotten into the house before them. The girl hinted at a master key. She called it a break-in. Alicia quietly said she'd taken the key with permission when she couldn't find it and planned to return it today. He said he enjoyed talking to her and that the offer to go out was a good joke to cheer him up. Lily got angry and asked for a spare key, but soon became flustered and covered her face with her hands. The guy watched from the side and asked why she was crying. Lily waved him off and pushed her plate away. Alicia said she was going to return it today. Lily realized the girl had obtained the key on the day the protagonist was ill. The girl smiled and said she could keep it if Jirold allowed it. Lily also asked for a spare key. Suzu was very calm and no one understood why. She urged everyone to calm down. She explained that the lock could actually be opened with a single shot, so the key or lack thereof didn't really matter. The man remarked that breaking locks outside the dungeons was a crime. He admitted that all the girls seemed to be competing for him. To make things fair, he decided to loan the keys to Lily and Suzu. The girls were delighted and decided to spend the evening together. By then it was dark. The windows were lit. At the table, they began pouring expensive wine and asking about plans. Alicia said she'd been invited by the Adventurers Guild from the royal capital. Suzu added that it was a celebration in honor of Alicia, who had survived the dungeon. The boy explained that as the guild leader, he had to report to his superiors. The Crystal Palace is the guild's headquarters. He noted that the guild has recently been attracting more than just adventurers. Geralda said that she was a very beautiful girl and he was even interested in who she would fall in love with. But he was not her equal at all. Traditional celebrations attract aristocrats and merchants, and at such a party you can earn more than in a year of work. It was said that it was these events that drew attention to the swordswoman. As a dungeon survivor, she could not be ignored. Lily explained that the invitation to the party at headquarters was likely intended for high-class adventurers. The girl complained that she wasn't thrilled about it and didn't like attracting attention. Suzu assumed that Alicia was then declining the invitation. However, they explained to her that she simply had to agree. Although interacting with celebrities from the royal capital was tiring, this was a chance to experience a world they had never seen before. Besides, it was a good opportunity to eat for free and earn a little money. Lily noticed that Alicia had revealed her plans too quickly. She wondered why Suzu had even been invited, calling it odd. The protagonist assumed Suzu was considered Alicia's companion. The mysterious man acted like a companion. All of this was possible thanks to Alicia. But Alicia corrected him by saying it was thanks to Giraldo, who helped them escape from the dungeon. Her friend insisted they needed to go. Wouldn't this be the perfect time to spend time with Geronimo? The hero assured Alicia that if she agreed, he would be her guide. He saw it as a good opportunity to contact headquarters. She was asked to consider the proposal carefully. Suzu explained that it was a joint trip with Girolamo. She was right next to him, and added that the royal capital was a great place for a date. The trip would last several days, and they would likely stay at a luxury hotel where they would have to spend the night together. The guy asked him not to listen to Suzu. He remembered the girl's words that middle-aged men have a hard time in love, and he thought that he had been rejected at the matchmaking, and it was unlikely that such a guy would be suitable for her. Suddenly, Alicia stood up from the table. She shouted to the man that she wanted to go to the party. Everyone was delighted with her mood and drank to the upcoming party and the luxurious hotel. Everyone rejoiced, except for Girolamo, who merely shook his head bowed. He saw Lily and addressed her. She explained that she would remain as administrator in their absence. Suzu and Alicia began to discuss the trip, but the man asked them to speak more quietly so as not to wake the neighbors. After a while, the station became busy. The heroes stood with their suitcases waiting for departure. Suzu arrived last, asking if she had made it in time. But everything was fine. Everyone was ready. Lily also showed up and announced that she'd bought them train tickets, and it was time to go. Suzu was surprised to be included in the trip, and very happy for her friend. She explained that it was all thanks to the leader. Most of the guests at the party were women. He asked Lily to be his chaperone. She's from the capital and knows the area. Lily thanked Girolamo for the opportunity. The man replied that it wasn't worth it. Lily exclaimed in confusion as to why Jirold was sitting next to Alicia. He took her hand. She decided they needed to decide who would sit next to him in a game of rock, paper, scissors. Suzu asked Lily not to yell. The woman asked Girolamo what his hobbies were. He replied that he read books about entrepreneurship and exercised. She said that she liked him. She said she'd take a short nap and then definitely sit next to the hero. But for now, Lily could hold his hand. The flight attendant thought they might be summoning someone together, since they were holding both of the main characters' hands. Lily blushed and explained that once they arrived in Arcanum, they would transfer to a carriage and then head to the airfield. Everyone wondered if they'd have planes. It turned out they were in a small pavilion with wyverns, wild dragons you could fly on. It was the first time Alicia and Suzu had seen something like this. Lily explained that this was the wyverns' flying carriage, and now they would be able to fly to the royal capital. They were greeted at the airfield. As representatives, they had to sign. Everyone wanted to take the dragons home. However, this proved impossible, as they were hatchlings hatched from eggs. Suddenly, the dragon Suzu had spoken of roared. Everyone started to show aggression, not understanding what was happening to them and why they were making so much noise. Alicia didn't understand what was happening. She heard quick footsteps behind her. It was Jirold, looking extremely alarmed. He emanated a negative energy the heroine had never felt, even in the dungeon with the monsters. She asked the boy what had happened. The man turned to her, began stuttering, and explained that he was very scared. The guild leader asked what she said, and she replied, "Nothing." The man said the chances of a dragon carriage crashing in the sky were 0%. He quipped that a fall from such a height would still result in death. The hero continued that this mode of transport was illegal. He couldn't understand what people were thinking. Alicia grabbed him under the arm, not fully understanding his words, but realizing they had to go. He explained that he couldn't summon the courage, Jirold's weak point. He cried out that he wasn't ready to die. However, a multitude of dragons had already seized their carriage and were driving it forward. Everyone exclaimed in bewilderment, finding what was happening too sudden. Lily's viewing had begun. The girl was talking on the phone. Everyone around her was shouting loudly into the receiver, as if they had given her too much freedom before. It was her turn to obey, and the viewing, as had been decided, was postponed until the future. There were only 4 passengers on board the flight. The passenger rooms were located downstairs. You had to hold onto the handrails to avoid falling while moving. There was also a staircase leading to the security desk and luggage storage area. Suzu noted that Lily was late for the cabin tour. An argument ensued over who would sit next to Jirold. Alicia declared that, as the chief guest, she should sit next to him. He thought that his hearing had been failing him lately and that maybe he should go to the hospital. Lily just smiled, not understanding the essence of the claims. Last time, Alicia sat next to them and thought they were respecting the line. Suzu concluded that everyone was equal here, and now either she or Lily had to teach them a lesson. The girls played rock, paper, scissors. Suzu won. She, smiling, declared that she would now sit next to the main character. The one with the dark aura merely told her to sit down. The girl didn't understand what had happened and felt as if he had burned out. He looked like someone best left alone. Alicia noticed that Suzu sensed it too, and that this aura was piercing even the adventurer's resistance. It became clear that Jirold was strong, yet still enigmatic. The girl turned to the boy. She quietly asked him in his ear if he was afraid of heights. She jumped up, hugged him, and said that she would definitely hold him until they took off. Lily turned to Suzu and asked her to stop. Everyone froze, not understanding her concern. The pilot suddenly came running and apologized for the delay. He explained that they had regained consciousness and it was time to depart. Everyone should take their seats and buckle up. The protagonist adjusted his glasses, agreed, and remarked that now they could finally take off. Alicia looked ahead and marveled at the beauty of the landscape. Lily asked Rolado what happened, why he was sighing. The town seemed tiny and the high mountains looked eerie. Suzu asked the boy to look out the window, but he refused. They turned to Girolado. He was sweating and anxious. It seemed even he had weaknesses. He explained that he had them, and he could say the same about Lily. He believed that, even though she didn't show it, something was definitely wrong with her. Suzu, her best friend, assumed Lily had a fight with her parents. She remembered that Lily had recently moved out. It wasn't that big of a deal. But her friend asked her to be more restrained, as Lily had been feeling quite down lately. The girl began her story. Her friends asked if they would arrange a viewing for her. Lily looked sad and said she wasn't interested at all, but her parents had found a candidate. The meeting was soon, so they needed to go home. She hadn't seen her parents in a while, so she was planning to visit them. She didn't know what to do. She should feign disgust at the candidate. But the hero remembered that during his first viewing, the girl had done exactly that, and it had been very hurtful. Alicia asked Lily if she was against the viewing in principle, and whether she had ever considered marriage. The girl blushed and replied. Twisting her hair, she explained that she was against it, as such decisions couldn't be made hastily. She asked the hero's opinion, but he remained silent. Alicia concluded that Lily didn't seem eager to get married and immediately declared that she would be ready to marry Girolamo right now. They discussed starting a family, having children, and devoting all their time to each other. Lily exclaimed in surprise upon hearing this. Suzu assumed the girl wanted to become a housewife and leave the Adventurers Guild. Jirold was puzzled by this and shook his head. The girl explained that it would be a wonderful adventure for her to spend her whole life with the hero. The girl asked Lily who it was, since she'd shown up at the guild early in the morning. The man thought it sounded like a marriage proposal. The other girls chimed in, noting that they would be pleased too. The girl became tense, admitting that she was not sure about marriage. She loudly declared that she definitely wanted children with Girolamo. Suzu added that she had the knack for both marriage and having children. Water came out of the guy's mouth, which he spat out. The girl explained that she thinks about the main character constantly. It is then that her whole body contracts. The man was shocked by this news and broke out in sweat, not quite understanding what was happening. The short-haired girl screamed that she wanted to be happy with him and have children. The hero still didn't understand what she was talking about. It was dangerous, and they had to get up. Suzu explained that the dwarves were unmatched in physical strength. Therefore, she was confident that of the three of them, she would bring him the greatest happiness. He asked Suzu, noting that he was confident in his abilities and that they would try to learn everything as best as possible. The girl explained that the main character is still inexperienced and needs to be taught everything. He recognized her as the employee from the restaurant, and she said her name was Suzu. He exclaimed, shocked by this information. Alicia explained that if Jirold allowed it, she would definitely learn everything. But she had to stop imagining things. Suddenly, all the strangest things shifted slightly, and the man froze. He looked out the window and noticed something seemed to have happened. He yelled for everyone to be careful. They swayed violently, and everything became disorganized. The girls began to fall and screamed in horror. Suddenly, Suzu jumped up above the hero. She fell right on top of him and cried out in discomfort. The man apologized to the girl, saying it was an accident because she wasn't wearing her seatbelt. Their cabin began to rock violently. The girl bumped into the guy again. She began to huff and puff, noting that this had all been a big coincidence. They rolled over each other due to the vibrations of the cabin. Suddenly, everything quieted down, and no one understood what it could have been. They explained that they simply met at a restaurant and that nothing happened between them. They had, of course, been warned about possible turbulence. But then everyone exclaimed. The protagonist and Suzu found themselves in a very awkward position, and it was all very accidental. The girl screamed that she felt very sick. The other girls froze in surprise. The hero jumped up from his seat and decided to use acceleration. He used his magic and quickly left his room. They ran to the restroom. The man left Suzu there. The man wiped the sweat from his forehead. Suddenly, someone shouted loudly and addressed everyone. The guy announced that a large flock of wyverns had appeared. Alicia opened the doors, looked at the sky, and she confirmed that there were indeed many wyverns there. They approached very quickly and scared everyone. The pilot somehow managed to stabilize the cockpit, but no one knew what would happen when the wyverns decided to attack. The protagonist wondered what they should do next. The boy became agitated, broke out in a sweat, and explained that such incidents had never happened before. Jirold exclaimed that this meant they had no plan. They apologized. The girl said that it was time for her to have breakfast and that she couldn't keep the guys from the team waiting, and suggested going on a date sometime. There were a great many wyverns, and they had already surrounded the ship. Everyone was wondering how much longer it would take to reach the capital. The hero asked everyone to excuse him. He turned to a passenger and shuddered. The protagonist decided to check out the situation. Alicia had also made a decision. She asked Lily to wait in the cabin. Suzu jumped out of the toilet. She felt very sick, but she asked them not to do anything terrible. The pilot watched closely. Wyverns were flying near the ship. The pilot was surprised to see passengers in his cockpit and couldn't figure out what they were doing there. They were surrounded by a swarm of wyverns, something he had never seen before. The hero turned to their pilot, noting that he must be a master at understanding wyvern behavior. The man laughed, saying it was the first time anyone had told him such a thing. After all, only wild wyverns flock together. He'd never seen such a thing himself, though he'd seen similar cases in a report once. Jirold noted that it was then that a giant dragon appeared. He was amazed by this information. It was a fire dragon that was gathering in a flock and circling around him. It was confirmed. The protagonist inquired whether the wyverns were gathering in a flock to confront someone stronger. The pilot explained that they were simply frightened. Despite their appearance, wyverns are cowardly. Jirold wondered what they were afraid of. The pilot noted that this was why no one expected it. He assumed the lady had scared them. The pilot explained that he was a fan. He recognized her as a powerful adventurer and expressed confidence that such a lady would have no trouble dealing with the wyverns. Alicia thanked him for the high praise, but noted that she did not consider herself the only such strong adventurer. He asked her again what she had said and thought that he was a 40-year-old virgin who had not had a girlfriend for over 100 years. The pilot apologized for his slip of the tongue, comparing the lady to a monster. The girl didn't seem bothered by this information. The boy grew worried. He noted that they had no clue why the wyverns had decided to form a pack and believed they needed a plan. Alicia screamed. The hero asked what had happened. She wondered if they were killing a fire dragon. The hero replied that he had never encountered such dragons. He had, of course, killed some pretty powerful enemies in dungeons, but nothing like this. The protagonist paused, considering what he had just heard. Suddenly, he realized that the wyverns were afraid of him. The ship rocked sharply, and everyone was surprised to see the dragons attack. The pilot exclaimed there was a guard above, but could he handle it alone? Everyone cursed. The pilot declared he couldn't fight them all off any longer. The wyverns were ferocious and predatory, their attacks furious. The guard fell to the ground, unsure what was happening. A spear flew at one of the attackers. The guy shouted that he didn't want to kill the wild wyverns, but they blocked their path. Now they must be destroyed to the last one. The protagonist was enveloped in a dark aura, holding a crossbow. Jirold fired a powerful crossbow bolt, piercing the wyvern's eye. The hunter noted the hit, but warned him it was too early to relax. There were 2 more wyverns ahead. It all happened too fast. The hero cursed, realizing he didn't have time to reload. He was forced to dodge the wyvern flying toward him. Lily said she was serious and that she would go on a date. At that moment, Alicia appeared behind him. She ran up and swung her long spear. The girl delivered the decisive blow to her opponent, landing a direct hit on his jaw. Then she leaped over the boy. He froze, still holding his crossbow at the ready. Suddenly, he released an arrow. Their coordinated teamwork completely neutralized the enemy. The hunter was surprised to learn who their passengers truly were, an adventurer and a guild leader. They explained that they had come to help, being far more experienced in combat than the staff. The hunter agreed and thanked the man, extending his hand. However, a new, loudly screaming opponent suddenly appeared from behind. There was a blow, and drops of blood spurted. Jirold readied his weapon. He released an arrow and exclaimed that his opponents shouldn't have taken him by surprise. He quickly defeated them. Alicia noted that the wyverns were rumored to be very intelligent. They maintained a formation when attacking, so vigilance was necessary. She expressed doubts about their ability to cope, given the difficulty of moving in their gear. The hero asked the girl to focus on the wyverns directly in front of her. He lifted his protective mask and assured her that he would take care of her safety himself. Alicia became embarrassed and called him by his name, deeply shocked. The hunter didn't understand the sound. The protagonist was surprised at how long it had been since he picked up a crossbow, but he felt his hands still remembered the skills from his past life. Suddenly, a cry of a new attack rang out. She clarified that she asked about his personal hobbies, such as movies or traveling, but he replied that his hobby was work. The girl said that Lily was simply glowing with happiness. Despite the change in tactics, the principle remained the same: shoot those within range. The hero exclaimed that those within 2 o'clock should have been eliminated first. He decided to deal with the rest himself. A multitude of enemies had gathered around the flying ship. The girl let out a cry of victory. The hero turned around in bewilderment. Jirold concentrated, looked closely at his opponent, raised his crossbow, and struck. The enemy fell, but another followed immediately. The guy managed to reload his weapon. The main character was able to fire projectiles without interruption. Lily and Suzu, sitting inside, were scared. The hero shot down one enemy with an arrow, and then attacked the second with lightning speed. The man exhaled, noting that he'd killed 3 at once, which was astonishing. Behind him, they began shouting again about an attack, and everyone was preparing for battle. The dragon began screaming and spinning. Alicia ran toward it with her weapon. She threw it up and began swatting at the enemies around her. He tried to dodge, but the heroine jumped up, appeared next to him, and struck him on the head. The guard was surprised by the lady's strength, noting that she was clearly an adventurer. There were still a great many enemies around. The protagonist was amazed at how perfectly they repelled all attacks. He suggested that perhaps they would make it out alive. She said she was going on a date with the guild leader, and it was her first date. Another girl joked that she was going to be a big girl. However, the young man realized it was too early to relax. They needed to maintain their position, because if the enemy attacked at once, they would be finished. The guard expressed surprise at how skillfully a man who hadn't handled a crossbow in a long time handled it. He also asked if they were being overly pessimistic about the situation. Jirold explained that an adventurer must always be prepared for the worst outcome. He braced himself for another attack. After some time, the enemies retreated slightly. However, they continued to attack, swarming around the aircraft. The guard exclaimed that 3 dragons were flying in the direction of 8 o'clock. The protagonist snapped his crossbow. Jirold left the two to rest and monitor the situation. Alicia offered him a break, but he became embarrassed and joked about his age. She declined, and the hero said they needed to get stronger against heavy weapons. The guard agreed and sank to the floor, deciding to rest as well. Alicia noted that she had performed well, but fighting enemies in the air was much more difficult than she had imagined. The tension could weaken her concentration. The girl paused for thought. She was surprised that the man was no longer afraid of heights, and she asked him a question. The hero froze and looked down. He replied that he couldn't say he was afraid of heights specifically. He simply didn't want to die a stupid death. He didn't have time to be afraid now. He was sure the guard thought the same. However, under stress, the guard noted that he was still alive. The hero looked ahead and assessed the situation. The man noticed that it was already completely dark and they were flying very close. Jirold heard from the pilot that wyverns could see well in the dark, so their position could not be called advantageous. She asked Suzu if she was head over heels in love with him, but he remembered that he had managed to get through even the darkest dungeons more than once. Everyone was amazed that he had eyes everywhere. He remembered how amazed the adventurers he accompanied had been. If you can't see, you need to sharpen your other senses. The protagonist decided to feel it again and concentrated. He felt the wyvern's wings cleaving the wind and heard the sounds of their flight. Suddenly, a cry for the Guild Master came from behind. It was a woman's voice, and the man was surprised she had startled him. He shouted that it was dangerous to climb. It was Lily, coming out of the room. She called out that she had brought him some warm corn soup. The girl took out a mug and a cup. Jirold was surprised by the soup, but thanked her. Alicia agreed. Lily explained that she couldn't fight and wanted to help in any way she could. She began pouring the soup. Suddenly, the girl froze and decided to share some new information. He turned around. Unexpectedly, the girl kissed him on the cheek. The hero froze, not understanding what had happened, and adjusted his glasses. He quietly asked Lily to wait downstairs a little longer. It dawned on Alicia as she finished her mug. She felt strange, but her intuition was sounding the alarm. Suzu said that Lily was too young to think about such things, and that she was already an adult. Lily asked if Suzu was sure she didn't mind her asking him out. Suddenly, Suzu emerged from the cabin. The protagonist perked up when he saw her. He asked what was going on. The girl explained that she had simply come to pick up some dishes. She also shared the good news. They would be entering the capital's airspace in 30 minutes. Alicia was surprised they only had 30 minutes left, noting that it wasn't much. Suzu confirmed that was precisely why they needed to hold out a little longer. The guard decided to remind everyone of the indisputable fact. He sat behind them, explaining to his superior that the wyverns were unlikely to wait patiently. Jirold, adjusting his glasses, agreed that this was absolutely true, and everyone should prepare for an attack. Movement to the side caught the hero's attention. Seeing Suzu, he asked her to climb back down immediately. She replied that she would be glad to, but couldn't fit through. She asked Geraldo with a pleading look to push her a little so that she could squeeze through. Alicia immediately came running, ready to help. She assured her she would save her. Suzu asked him not to push her too hard. Jirold explained that the wyverns were already close and they needed to prepare for an attack. He advised Suzu to be patient, as she wouldn't be able to get through that easily. The guard and adventurers prepared to fight the wyverns. Alicia reported that the attack was coming from the 6 o'clock direction, and that there were attacks from other directions as well. The enemy attacked en masse again. Their primary objective became evading attacks and avoiding losses, reducing their numbers at any cost. There was no other choice. The protagonist became thoughtful, noticing that some of the wyverns were moving differently along a precise trajectory. Lily said that she thought Suzu liked Mr. Jirold because she hugged him, but she replied that it was just a regular hug and there was no love involved. The girl asked everyone to hold on tight as they were aiming at the ship. Suddenly, one of the opponents struck the aircraft. All the heroes grabbed hold tightly. The guard noted that they crashed into the front cabin. The pilot was asked about his condition, and the hero realized things were bad, as the ship was the target. Realizing that the attack from above had failed, they decided to change tactics. Jirold, pondering the plan, looked at one of the ship's wyverns and had an idea. He realized the ship could be controlled without a single wyvern, and the guard confirmed this. The young man ordered the plan to proceed and apologized to Alicia for the fact that she would have to fight alone for a while. The heroes did not understand the plan, but in the meantime, Jirold jumped on top of the flying ship. Finding himself right in the air, he caused bewildered cries. Suddenly, the adventurer grabbed one of the ropes and held on tightly. He released a crossbow bolt and flew upward, approaching the wyvern. In a clever maneuver, he landed right on top of the beast, which roared in surprise. The hero decided to use the training skill, which allowed him to catch and subdue monsters. He admitted he wasn't an expert, but he'd used it a couple of times. Usually, training required moving from physical to psychological dominance. It should be easier than taming monsters in the dungeon. He decided to subdue her. Suzu said that he was not her type at all, and asked Lily how she fell in love with him. Suddenly, a guard observing the scene swore, noticing that his spare spear had broken. They were attacking from all sides, and he was warned to be careful. Suddenly, Jirold rode through on his dragon and defeated his opponent. Alicia was delighted and mentioned Jirolda's name. The guard remarked that it was the first time he'd seen anyone subdue a beast and was confused about who this hero was. But Jirolda, sitting on a wyvern in the dark night, reminded him that he was merely the head of the Adventurers Guild. The battle on the wyverns continued unabated. Everything around the flying vessel creaked as the enemy circled in the air. The pilot hit the ground, clutching his head. He was perplexed by the wyverns' behavior. They had never attacked a ship before. In all his years of service, such a thing had never happened. He realized the situation was critical, and an immediate course change was required. He was surprised when the dragon attacked again. He noticed one of the wyverns flying very close. The pilot was shocked to see that it was one of his own wyverns. A man was on it. He couldn't understand what was happening at all. Suddenly, controlling the dragon, the hero struck the enemy and prepared the crossbow. He noted that everything was going well. He had never flown like this before. However, he felt no fear. Thanks to his taming skill, he shared all the creature's emotions. Wyverns had no fear of heights. He needed to move on. Lily said that when she first started working, she was afraid to even look him in the eye. Now he could aim safely. The hero rebooted. He thought that flying was actually enjoyable. He felt an immense sense of freedom. The hero could choose any line of fire. He took aim and, with one swing, fired arrows at several opponents. They immediately felt electric shocks and started screaming. The guard didn't understand what it was. Alicia shouted that it was a lightning attack. It was possible to hit targets without even hitting them directly. While it wouldn't disable the enemy for long, they were in the sky. Therefore, such an attack was deadly. The enemies continued to attack. The hero was surprised that they had decided to attack him rather than the ship. It was advantageous. He continued to move forward, drawing the enemies further and further away from the vessel. He performed sharp loops. The opponents could barely keep up with him. Suddenly, the boy took aim with his crossbow and fired a decisive, accurate shot. He pierced multiple opponents with a blast of light. The guard remarked that it looked cool. Suddenly, Alicia asked him to look ahead. They were retreating, but it was too early to relax. The girls remarked that everything was probably fine now. The heroes were directly above the capital, which was glowing brightly, making it highly visible. The guard exhaled. They were able to enter the air defense zone. Now they were definitely safe. Suddenly, the hero continued flying. Jirold noticed something in the sky and didn't understand what it meant. Even more unexpectedly, another wyvern flew straight ahead, glaring at the boy. He couldn't understand why another one had appeared. Perhaps it had gotten separated from the pack, but that was unlikely. He said that he knew that the guild was afraid of him, and asked if she was afraid of him. Jirold realized she was clearly confused after that attack. He realized he wouldn't have time to repel the attack. She was flying straight toward their aircraft. Suddenly, Alicia looked up and gasped. The hero shouted the girl's name. Suddenly, a huge magical pillar struck the ship. One of the enemy dragons lost control and began to fall. Everyone on board staggered. They recovered from the fall and wondered how the lady was doing. The girl lay on the ground, her eyes closed. She was exhausted and found herself right on top of Girolamo, who was hugging her tightly. She opened her eyes. He asked if she was hurt, but she replied that he should be worried about himself. The hero dismounted the wyvern and jumped down to save her. He admitted he had acted foolishly, but the most important thing was that she was alive. The hero treasured her very much. Tears welled up in Alicia's eyes. She hugged the boy and said his name. Now everything was clear to her. They sat in silence under the moonlight. The guard turned to the other passengers, noting that he now saw that their connection was more than just guild ties. The young man sweated, blushed, and decided he shouldn't have joked like that, since she was his girlfriend. Arriving in the city, they saw the dawn. The name of the guest of honor at the ball that had been organized was announced. Alicia stepped out, the sound of her heels catching everyone's attention. She appeared in a luxurious outfit. She had an aura of wealth about her, and those present were amazed by her appearance at the event. She said he used to seem like a terrible tyrant to her, but now she was comfortable with him. She suggested that maybe he should start by addressing them by their first names. The exclamations confirmed that it was Alicia, and in person she looked far more beautiful than rumor had suggested. The high-ranking officials couldn't believe their eyes. One of the young men remarked on the girl's perfection. His companion explained that his friend, who hadn't believed the rumors, wouldn't regret coming. The interlocutor replied that his friend simply had a nasty temperament, and he feared he would deceive him to lure him into a trap. The other man merely chuckled. Suddenly, the young man declared his desire for Alicia, fixing his gaze on her. The other guy didn't get it, unless this man had just been flirting with the Viscount's daughter. However, he thought this young man had nothing in common with her. All the adventuresses were very emotional and unusual. Alicia was different, and that interested him. A friend told a friend that the girl was communicating with others, and that the guy had competitors. The heroine's interlocutor explained that he was the heir to the capital's largest trade association. He insistently invited Lady Alicia to visit their mansion. He promised to treat her to the finest delicacies. The girl replied that she would definitely stop by if the opportunity presented itself. Suddenly, an old man addressed Lady Alicia. He admired her beauty. The heroine laughed. He kissed her palm. The guy decided that a girl like that needed someone younger. His companion asked him to be more discreet to avoid any unwanted problems. The protagonist observed their conversation from afar. Alicia leisurely sipped her wine. Two young men approached her. One introduced himself as Alfred, expressing an honor to meet her. The girl nodded. He thanked Lily for her daily report. George, who introduced himself as the patron of the local guild and had heard a lot about it, offered Alicia a transfer to the capitals. She declined. and the young man abruptly promised to relieve her boredom. Here the guy turned to the girl with a request to become his. Suddenly, like the shadow of death, a dark figure appeared from behind and snatched Alicia from the young man's arms. Alfred froze, unable to comprehend what was happening. His comrade grabbed him from behind. The young man began to fall, and his companion barely managed to hold on to his sleeve. Everyone realized he'd had too much to drink. They decided to call the servants and leave him there. The ladies of the court, noting his good looks, found his intoxication odd and attributed it to Alicia's captivating beauty. The hero indicated where to take the young man. Suddenly, Jirold's name was called. The boy was startled, jumped, and hiccuped. He noticed that Alicia had seen everything. She grabbed his arm, noting how unexpected it was. The girl did not understand what he was thinking when he did such a thing, since publicity could cause a scandal. Jirold explained that his patience had run out, as he had not only hugged her but also proposed marriage. Alicia asked if he was jealous. He was at a loss for words. The girl embraced Girolamo and assured him of her undying love. The hero begged him to stop. His manly heart couldn't take it anymore. He remarked that the ball was far more tiring, and, standing in the hall and eavesdropping, he realized that this small talk belonged to another world. They were very different from the usual bustle in the Adventurers Guild. At the Adventurers Guild, a guy asked for a discount on potions because he needed to buy 5. She thought that he answered so calmly, as if they had known each other for many years, and that was how she began to like the guild leader. The man expressed confidence that Alicia had had a hard time today, but she would cope. The hero apologized to Alicia. She explained that there was no need to apologize. The girl drew his attention to the music that had started playing, and it was time to dance. The protagonist hugged the girl, saying that the guests of honor should be in the hall. The girl nodded, indicating that it was indeed time for her to go. The guy circled her and hugged her tighter. Unexpectedly, the girl's grip tightened even further. She asked Girolamo to dance with her. The violinist played, and the guests discussed and drank. Meanwhile, Alicia and the hero danced in a large space, feeling each other. He was surprised that his legs were probably still sore, but chalked it up to saving the girl from the wyvern. He decided not to dwell on the pain. The girl twirled around in the dance, thanking him for his constant protection. She pulled him close, hugged him, and confessed her love. They began kissing. Suddenly, someone saw them on the balcony. It was Suzu and Lily. They were surprised to see a couple kissing. Suzu noticed she was feeling a little lightheaded, and she was shocked. It seemed she'd had enough to drink, but she praised the drink. Lily was embarrassed by this rather unpleasant sight. At that moment, someone inquired about the girls. The girl said that in reality, everything was different, and from that day on, she fell in love with the head of the guild. The servant approached His Highness the Duke. He explained that both guests looked pleasant, and he wanted to chat with them. The heroes continued to dance, admiring each other. They moved to the rhythm of the music in the luxurious hall. Everyone present discussed and observed the proceedings. Alicia was truly beautiful even in dance. Everyone commented on her training, as she had good posture, a sweet appearance, and great strength. The men whispered about who would ask her out next, and whether they would start a duel with her partner. Jirold watched from the sidelines. He noted that Alicia was doing an excellent job. Suddenly, the guild leader addressed him. He said it had been a while since they'd seen each other. The leader emphasized that thanks to Alicia, the ball had attracted an unprecedented number of guests. This must have had a positive impact on the guild, as today's ball attracted media attention. It seems many patrons had their say. They discussed the need to transfer Ms. Alicia to the Adventurers Guild headquarters. The protagonist froze upon hearing this news. The answer apparently concerned Girolamo himself as well. The boss asked if he would support Ms. Alicia's transfer. If everything went well, it would be entirely his doing, and it would be a major step forward, since the guy was already almost at the top, and things were going well in the dungeon too. The man explained that things were different. Suddenly, his companion apologized. He explained that there were too many patrons at the ball and they needed to be greeted. All matters would need to be discussed later. Jirold nodded. The hero considered transferring to headquarters. Truth be told, he wasn't particularly interested in promotions or anything like that. He simply served as the head of the guild branch, and the position became available to him thanks to his continued work. She asked how she could help, and they told her that they wanted to receive their reward. He decided he wasn't obligated to pay attention to everyone, like his senpais. He intended to continue working and striving forward. Suddenly he froze, lost heart, and decided that work should not be more important, but that he should try harder in love. Suddenly, he looked around. He didn't notice either Lily or Suzu in the hall, and wondered where they were. At that moment, Lily turned around and asked the man who had approached what he wanted. A guy approached them and said the party was going well. He assumed it was Suzu. He introduced himself as Georg von Dorf and explained that his friend had been drinking heavily, which was why he was alone. He asked if they would join him. Suzu allowed him to stay, saying they could do as they wished. Georg thanked the lady and asked Lily who she was. She introduced herself as Suzu's escort and a member of the Adventurers Guild. Georg, struck by her simplicity and hidden grace, invited them to join the dance and asked if they were enjoying the party atmosphere. He knew they seemed cold, but that wasn't a bad thing. Being serious was wonderful. Suddenly, an idea occurred to the boy. He opened his arms and invited them to visit his estate together. He boldly assured them that they would feel more comfortable in his company there than here. Lily loudly replied that they had to decline and apologized. The boy scratched his head and said they must have misunderstood him. He assured them he was no mere scoundrel, but an aristocrat, or rather, a baron. He believed they couldn't refuse such an invitation. Suzu laughed, noting that it was all funny. This was the sixth man to say the same thing, so they decided to decline, but still thanked him for the invitation. The heroine explained that in order to receive rewards for quests, adventurers opened their own private business, and that the quest required them to obtain 4 cannibal fangs. The friends explained that they were waiting for an invitation from another gentleman, so they would not accept this. Georg was surprised and asked who the gentleman was. He declared that he was a gentleman himself and would not give up easily. Suddenly, an old man approached and apologized for interrupting their conversation. Everyone turned around. The old man explained that he was the butler of His Majesty, Archduke Gaspani. His Highness wished to speak with the lady and requested that she accompany him to the nearby salon. Lily was surprised by the mention of the Archduke. Suzu didn't know who it was and smiled. They headed toward the building. The protagonist, strolling through the garden, noticed that the girls were gone. He looked for them and decided they must be in the salon. The guy knew the salon was a gathering place for high society, and it was hard for him to imagine his girlfriends there. Suddenly, he exclaimed when he saw them up ahead. The girl turned to the leader. Suzu was sitting on a chair nearby. They were indeed there. Lily explained the situation and introduced the protagonist to His Majesty, calling him the leader of the Adventurers Guild, the leader of the Dungeon Guild. The Archduke remarked that this must be Lily's superior. He introduced himself as Gaspani. The hero realized that this man belonged to the royal family and was the 5th heir to the throne, Archduke Gaspani. The young man declared that it was a great honor for him to meet His Majesty. He asked him to drop the formalities. He was often written about in the newspapers, and many women were involved with him, although he was rumored to already have a wife and child. Gaspani approached Lily. He said she called herself an ordinary administrator. He thought this place was more suited to a lady like her. He asked if she'd heard that adventurers were ignorant bandits. They demanded to be paid twice as much. He apologized to Girolamo, who replied that everything was fine. He sat down and agreed that their level of ignorance was characteristic. The Archduke expressed his firm belief that bandits like adventurers were unsuitable companions for Lily. The hero exhaled. He understood that adventurers never managed to gain the respect or love of high society. Now the general staff was making every effort to raise its status in the public eye. It was accustomed to this kind of treatment of adventurers. Gaspani offered the young man a better job than his current one, for example, as his secretary. The hero was surprised by this proposal. He asked His Highness if he could say anything. Lily replied that although adventurers were seemingly intimidating, their numbers were dwindling. In addition, in recent times, there have been a number of amazing individuals like Miss Alicia who have gained fame not only as adventurers. She emphasized that adventurers are vital to society and make an undeniable contribution. This is all thanks to them. They bring resources from the dungeons that cannot be found above ground. It's worth remembering that dungeons are very dangerous, and even capable adventurers perish there. Gaspani noted that this is very scary. Even knowing the danger, these amazing people kept going. Looking forward, she maintained her faith in herself. With sparkling eyes, they set out on adventures. Lily considered such people truly strong. She explained that she deeply respected them. The protagonist looked at the girl. Lily added that she was therefore happy to be able to support them. For this reason, she had no interest in other work and apologized to His Highness. An advisor approached the Archduke. He whispered something in his ear, causing surprise. The gentleman asked Lily if it was true that she was the daughter of the famous Viscount Alessio. They shouted that the task was too difficult and that they should be paid twice as much as what was written on the paper. The girl was surprised he'd managed to find out this information. She lowered her head and confirmed it. The man explained that he and her father had a good relationship. The girl expressed gratitude and said she would be delighted to have a close relationship with His Highness. It would be a great honor and pride for her father. The protagonist tensed, noticing Lily's upset and worried expression. He knew of her mid-level aristocratic origins, but he hadn't imagined she was of such illustrious descent. The gentleman returned to his previous proposal, quit her job and become his personal servant. He added that her father would probably be pleased. Besides, wouldn't it be quieter near the royal capital? The salary, of course, would also be decent. Unexpectedly, Jirold turned to His Highness. He froze and asked what was going on. The man bowed and apologized deeply, explaining that they were currently on duty. The ball would be over soon, and they needed to be released to prepare for the opening. He took his girlfriends and left the room. The Duke dismissed them with permission to leave. The protagonist left the hall. George watched and eavesdropped, noting the unexpectedness of the incident. The Archduke had indeed offered Lily the position of his secretary. The fact that he had power due to his royal family made this, in fact, a strange proposition. The small office was stuffy. Suzu sat in a chair. The hero asked Lily how she was feeling. She thanked him for his concern and for saving her. She said they were joking and told him to give her more money. The man explained that she was his subordinate, and if his subordinates got into trouble, it was his duty to help them out. The girl named the guild leader. She asked if she could ask him for one more favor. She always got much more help from him, and this would be too impertinent. Lily decided to share her request. Alicia suddenly declared that she would never agree to this. She blushed. The other heroes ate, confused. The girl screamed that she couldn't take Girolamo. They had to work together. Lily turned to Alice, asking if they should secretly take the leader away. She mentioned that they had even danced with him at the ball and kissed. Suzu noted that she was hearing this for the first time, and that after Lily, it was her turn. The protagonist announced that they were going to visit Lily's house. Besides, her real family was still in the capital. He was a little nervous, being her boss, but he had to help Lily with her affairs. She was smiling and had already informed them. She was planning to visit him with her lover. The girls' mouths dropped open in surprise. Lily was overjoyed to be able to introduce her beloved. The heroes quickly arrived in the capital, at the Crystal Palace. The city streets were bustling with life, with large carts moving along narrow passages. Lily said that she constantly puts up with guys like that and that they have safety instructions for newbies. Lily confirmed the Guild Master's words. She found herself right there, at her parents' house. The mansion sparkled and dazzled with its luxury. Jirold noted that the girl looked like a true lady. She laughed, noting that it was difficult to impress the guild leader. He explained that it was something else. Such a huge mansion felt awkwardly close. They were almost there, and they had to hold on. The girl grabbed the man's hand. Girolamo was to play the role of her boyfriend. They recalled the details of their conversation in the carriage. Lily had insistently wanted him, as her chosen one, to meet her parents. The girl nodded, explaining that her parents wanted her to marry. If they found out she had a boyfriend, they'd back off. Besides, it was a royal offer. It was about becoming their secretaries. This meant Prince Gaspard was serious. Lily believed it was only a matter of time before her parents retired, so they had to act first. They decided to demonstrate their love and prove their feelings. The protagonist understood everything. Lily wanted to win her parents over to her side. Could the nobles defy the royal family? The girl explained that no, but it was the only solution she could think of. She begged the boy to help. He realized there was no point in arguing. Frankly, he didn't like it. However, if you consider it a rehearsal for his future relationship with Alicia, it made sense. He nodded. Suddenly, the man's stomach churned and he began to fidget. The girl asked him to be patient. At that moment, the nymph addressed them, and Lily turned around. The nymph was delighted to see her. The hero asked Lily if she was her sister, remarking on her beauty. The girl explained that she was her mother. The mother was confused as to who was standing next to her daughter. She thought that if she gave in now, everyone would continue to take advantage of her softness. The main character cleared his throat. He said quietly but clearly that he was pleased to meet her. He introduced himself as Jirold. The mother groaned and became frightened. The woman suddenly fell to the ground. Lily ran up asking if everything was okay. Then she asked her mother what she was doing next to this horrible man. The hero was stunned by these words. The girl explained that she wanted to introduce them. She introduced the guy as her boyfriend, Jirold. The mother asked again, not understanding who it was. Lily confirmed it, and foam began to come out of her mother's mouth. The girl didn't understand what was happening. They moved indoors. Her mother screamed that Lily was insane. She couldn't explain her connection to a man so easily capable of murder. The girl screamed emotionally, beside herself with rage. Lily asked her mother to calm down. Her father also asked his wife to sit down. He apologized to the man for his wife's rudeness. Jirold, trembling, said it was nothing. Lily's father wanted to see the guest's face. The protagonist revealed that he was Vicomte Alicio and that there was no need, as his face was too stern. Lily's father suggested that he smile a little to calm his wife down. The man tried. He lifted the corners of his lips only slightly, and his expression became even more terrifying. The man realized it was practically impossible. Lily asked her father not to laugh. She said Jirold was just a little nervous. Now the hero didn't feel bored by such treatment. Everyone was afraid of his face, which spoiled the atmosphere. Until recently, this had been a common occurrence in the guild. Lily's words seemed to resolve the tension. She said she could handle them herself. Jirold appeared and asked what was going on. The father may have begun to wonder if this might truly be his daughter's chosen one. Lily explained that Jirold was her boss, the head of the guild, completely absorbed in his work. The man insisted their relationship was serious. He came to ask his parents not to bring up Lily's matchmaking again. His father seemed to understand. However, the mother cried out, accusing them of abusing their position. She believed they were manipulating their young daughter for their own ends, be it money or property. Suddenly, Lily screamed, jumped up, and demanded that her parents stop. She declared her seriousness and pointed at Girolamo, declaring that she wanted his child. The protagonist rushed to calm her down. The girl's mother collapsed, unable to do anything. The father turned to his daughter, asking her not to say such a thing, as her mother had become ill again. He apologized, but noted that he thought Jirold and he were the same age. The boy cleared his throat and announced that he had turned 40. He discussed old age and the illnesses that come with it. If his daughter decides to remarry, what will their ages be then? Will he be able to protect both his daughter and the unborn child and raise them, given his age? Lily's father explained that there would be no objections if he answered seriously. The hero added that, based on his past life, he could live comfortably for at least another 60 years, and he had nothing to object to. He then turned to them, saying that although they were aristocrats, they were still middle class. Once they left the mansion, everything would go to their male relatives. He wanted his daughter to marry into a family where she would not have to worry about her life. That is, into a family of higher status. The girl said that he was dead drunk and couldn't even carry out the team's orders, and asked him to hook up somehow. He said that, as she had said, they needed to show something other than these fangs. Lily looked sad. Jirold looked into her eyes. He understood her concern for her well-being. However, he asked, could they respect the person's own opinion? From the boss's perspective, he could only confirm that Lily was enthusiastic as a member of the Adventurers Guild. He asked them to temporarily put aside any talk of matchmaking and marriage, suggesting they take a closer look. A negative voice rang out. The mother declared that they needed a matchmaker, as the girl's beauty period was too short. The man was surprised that an elf was speaking. He praised the girl for her beauty. The woman blushed and expressed outrage at his behavior. She believed he was not only using his daughter, but also choosing her as his target. It seemed to her that all adventurers were savages, and she would not allow her daughter to work in such a place. She had to leave there. The father said they understood Lily's wishes. He lit another cigarette and explained that they couldn't recognize Girolamo after what they had learned. This was the eternal dilemma of the nobility. This was the answer the protagonist received after a conversation with his parents. The girl walked down the hallway. She thanked the protagonist for saying so many nice things about her. The boy cleared his throat and replied that it was true. He apologized for his chatter. Lily explained that her parents had always been rude. Jirold understood her decision. It was better to become an adventurer than to remain part of the family. That was quite bold. He didn't want people who didn't know anything to insult him. On the other hand, the hero himself wasn't very well versed in the intricacies of aristocracy. Lily understood everything. She took his hand. The girl said that they were better off together. He suggested that they start by talking about their achievements and asked if they made their own costumes. Now they were a couple. The hero didn't understand where she was leading him. Lily showed him a room. She explained that they needed to wait a little while she unpacked. The guy agreed. He was looking at the photographs. One photo showed Lily with Suzu. Lily seemed mischievous as a child. The hero became curious about her relationship with Suzu. He took a closer look at the photo. There was a book of heroic deeds. The girl said she hadn't taken it from the house. It turned out to be a book of jokes about old adventurers. Jirold had never seen anything like it. He noted that the book was old and unlikely to be in good condition. The hero apologized, but they allowed him to read it, since Lily herself was a singer. She reread the book several times. The adventures she read about became the starting point of her journey. I was particularly impressed by the story of a nameless old adventurer who constantly challenged the dungeon in the City of Towers. The girl asked if the protagonist knew about this. It was about 100 years ago. It was the highest record in the dungeon. Adventurers often retired. Most of them settled for a second life. But not this man. He spent his entire life seeking adventure and was destined to become famous. However, he never returned. This was Jirold. The girl burst into tears as she read. She couldn't believe such a determined person existed. Then, a strong desire arose in her. Immediately after being forgiven, she began fighting Suzu. She didn't immediately become an adventurer, choosing the path of a philosopher instead. Lily wanted to join a guild in Tower City to follow in the footsteps of the unknown adventurer. The hero froze. He thought for a moment, and then told the girl that he was that person. Meanwhile, Lily changed into a schoolgirl uniform. The man didn't understand why she did this. The girl decided she'd get rid of him sooner or later, so she thought, why not wear the uniform? She asked him how he liked her outfit. She thanked him for his help and said she was a little confused. The guy blushed and replied that he had nothing to say. Lily asked if he was excited. He shook his head in denial. He only asked if female students were required to wear skirts. He was about to say something, but Lily interrupted him. She noted that Girolamo didn't seem to have any particular preferences in clothing, so she decided to change. The protagonist asked her not to change in his presence, but the girl explained that she had done so many times around him and simply wanted to reminisce about the good old days. She asked the guy to close his eyes. He agreed and covered his face with his hands. Suddenly, the girl pushed him forward. Jirold fell onto the bed, unsurprised. Suddenly, the girl hugged him and confessed her love. The heroine asked about what was between them. The protagonist closed his eyes and asked Lily if she liked him. The girl asked what he was talking about and unexpectedly kissed him. She pulled away. Alicia said that she fell in love with Mr. Girolamo, and from that moment their relationship did not develop in any way. But she did not mind if everything remained as it was. Lily said they were lovers, and such a convenient opportunity simply wouldn't come along. She suggested that they could do whatever they wanted together now. The man began to sweat. The clothes flew a short distance away. The girl declared that she definitely wanted to have a child. These were Lily's shocking words. Lily asked the guy what he thought about her figure. She admitted that she may not be as good as Alicia, whose appearance often drew admiring glances, but she still hasn't lost hope and believes that she also has her advantages. The girl was embarrassed, but still suggested that if he didn't mind, they could look at her together. Jirold took his time assuring her that Lily had her own special charm. At least that's what he thought. These words greatly embarrassed the girl, and she blushed, looked down, was momentarily confused, and did not know how to react. She smiled and laughed, hugged the man, and said how glad she was to hear it. The hero added that she was softer than Alicia. She said that she wanted to become the girlfriend of the head of the Adventurers Guild. Suddenly, the hero thought about Alicia and asked Lily to stop talking about this topic. He decided it was better to talk about something else and grabbed the girl. She grimaced and apologized. Lily wondered what they should do next. The girl asked the guy what they should do. However, the hero himself was covered in sweat and did not know what to do. He was stupefied. Jirold had knowledge from books and other sources, but he couldn't move his body. He mused that studying tactics was nothing compared to actual combat, like the art of war. He thought that if this were a dungeon, he would have surely died by now. Lily asked what was wrong. The boy explained that he simply wasn't ready. At that moment, Suzu appeared from the side. She noted that this was indeed the case, and that was precisely why Jirold was no good for anything. Both turned their heads, surprised by Suzu's appearance. Lily screamed in surprise upon seeing her friend. She asked if maybe since they were on a date they could hold hands. She asked Lily not to run away so rudely again. Suzu was glad that her friend had become more confident. She added that if things had gone any further, she wouldn't have interfered, and it was all thanks to Giorlato. The hero rubbed his head, embarrassed, and asked Suzu where she came from. She explained that she had come from their parents' house. Pointing to the building ahead, she said everything was clear. The boy became curious that her parents lived there. The girl explained that they lived and worked in that house. She had come here through the trees. Suzu walks the same route she's been taking since childhood. Everyone asked if it was dangerous, but Suzu replied that Lily had always been the one who posed the danger. Lily asked her friend to shut up. Suddenly, the parents came running, alarmed by the noise, and asked if everything was okay. Mom was also curious whether the rude man was insulting her. Suzu stated that it was now her turn to monopolize Giorlato, and they needed to move on. She threw the boy out of the trees. Lily ran to the window and looked down in surprise. The heroes climbed down from the trees and ran down the road away from her parents. Lily was disappointed and sad. The city was bustling. Smoke billowed in the sky. Suzu was strolling through the city. The protagonist approached her. They were sailing on a boat. The girl said she was just curious what clothes he liked since he didn't say what she looked like today. The guy asked her where she got the perfumed cigarette, noting that it was a luxury item, unlike regular cigarettes. The girl explained that she had received it the day before from a fat man at a party. It was Archduke Gaspani. She added that Lily simply wasn't right for him in this situation. Suzu thought that the fact that Suzu was there during recess played a role in Lily's behavior. The girl froze upon hearing this. She explained that she'd been with Lily for as long as she could remember. If her sister was bullied, she would, of course, defend her. Jirold noted that Lily had fulfilled her dream of becoming an adventurer and praised Suzu. The girl blushed and looked embarrassed. She told the boy he shouldn't say such things so suddenly. She emphasized that Lily had become an adventurer of her own free will. Suzu could have imagined herself as a nobleman's servant. The hero apologized for bringing up the subject again, but it was about Lily. The hero asked if it had been a good idea to interrupt her earlier. He thought she should have played the role of assistant. She smirked, calling it unpleasant. The boy realized he definitely had problems. He thought this was a chance to get closer to Lily. Suzu explained that love is good, but not the main thing. The hero agreed that this was true. Perhaps he was upset that he had missed the chance to shed his status. But he decided that wasn't the case. And, frankly, she helped him a lot. He couldn't have handled it on his own. Suzu noted that this was an unexpected reaction. Or perhaps the girl simply lacked feelings. In Girolamo's mind, Alicia occupied most of his thoughts. Suzu understood the distribution of his thoughts. He said that she was wearing very casual clothes and that the outfit suited her very well. The hero adjusted his glasses and explained that it was a certain perception, but he was at the center of this triangle. He meant that the three of them should have an equal chance. That's why Suzu offered to kiss him. The hero didn't understand what her motivation was, but she explained that since someone had already kissed him, it would be unfair if he didn't do it with her. Besides, now there were only two of them left, and he wouldn't have to think or worry about anything else. There were two of them, not counting the rower. He was sure he'd gotten used to such circumstances by now. Suzu offered him a kiss and urged Girolato on. She also told him he should be grateful for the opportunity to practice. The man sighed and agreed. Jirold kissed her. He pulled away, noting that it had been very awkward, and blushed deeply. The girl also looked at him with blushing cheeks, looking worried and agitated. Suddenly, the cigarette she was holding fell out of her hands and began to fall to the ground, but the guy caught it sharply. He looked closely at her face. She was very embarrassed and at the same time incredibly happy that it finally happened. She was horrified by what he said, but he replied that he thought they were all good. The protagonist asked her how she felt. She replied that it was simply unfair. It was already dark outside. In the luxurious house, the conversation was about Alicia spending the morning shopping for Suzu and the afternoon exploring the city alone. She was curious about what the others were doing. Lily explained that everything had gone as usual. Suzu nodded in agreement. This seemed odd. She asked Girolamo if he knew what the others had been up to. Lily explained that she was simply introducing Girolamo to his parents, but Suzu interrupted. The girl explained that she had a date in town and they had kissed. Alicia exclaimed that they were doing this without her knowledge, and she should have stayed with Suzu. She wanted a date too. The man said he had to leave the capital the following afternoon, and they all went together. Alicia exclaimed that he was changing the subject. The girl was upset and remarked that she wouldn't disturb him this time. It was dark at night, and the moon was shining in the sky. The room was dark, and the guy opened the window for some ventilation. He looked out onto the street, pondering what was happening. He lit a cigarette and noted that these had been tense days, the only days in the capital. He remembered all the events, all the kisses. He remembered Alicia being angry with him, and it was true. He could have rejected them both, but he couldn't. He didn't understand what it meant to fall in love. He didn't know if he could treat these feelings carelessly. He said that everything was fine, and there was no need to worry. Remembering their expressions, and even more, he was suddenly called out. He realized it was unsafe to stand there. It was Alicia. She stood on the balcony and greeted the hero. The man wondered if this wasn't too bold for a simple greeting. The girl explained that Lily and Suzu hadn't known about it, so it was worth it. The girl hugged the guy, and he said her name. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through him. The girl hugged him so tightly that Jirold began to struggle, saying it hurt. The girl explained that this was punishment for him spending time with other girls without telling her. He apologized. He was still feeling sick. He explained that Alicia was his number one, and there was no doubt about it. The girl suddenly let him go. The hero thanked her and said that, if possible, he would like her to give him a chance to atone for his guilt. He extended his hand, but the girl stopped him, saying she wouldn't let him just kiss her. The guy didn't understand her words. Suddenly, the girl looked away, and the man's nose started bleeding. Jirold was shocked by the girl's appearance. Alicia was flushed and embarrassed. She said she had been dressed very nicely. She explained that it was Suzu who chose this outfit for her. The man asked to refrain from assaulting employees. The saleswoman said that people often come in with their parents, so there was no need to be shy, and called him Daddy. The girl approached Girolamo, reminding him of his desire to atone for his guilt. Thus, she had a proposal. The hero suddenly demanded sharply that she stop. The girl didn't understand his reaction. The guy froze, unable to respond. He soon apologized, explaining that too many forgotten moments had happened in his life today. He added that if he didn't calm down now, his heart would pound. The girl said that this was not her father, but her lover. He thought he had behaved terribly in that store because it was his first date and he was nervous. She made him a bento and offered him his choice of ice cream. He thought that a home-cooked meal prepared by a girl was the most desirable event for an old virgin. She said that she didn't care what other people thought, and that she thought they looked like they were in love. Giralda thanked her for the date and said that it was hard for him to be with a young and beautiful girl. She asked him if he wanted to date her anymore, and he replied that she was just as worried about relationships as he was. He thought that she was probably suffering from feelings for him, and she confessed her love to him. The kiss tasted like chocolate. Alicia asked if they wanted to go get something to eat. Alicia begins to command her group. Late that night, in a large mansion, Jirold poured himself a glass of water and sighed heavily. He heard a voice telling him to calm down. However, he was anything but calm. Rolado felt sorry, but there was nothing he could do. He opened the door and asked the girl to calm down and tell him more about the situation. She started to tell him, but then stopped. She repeated the words she'd just heard. The protagonist thought she should go get some fresh air. She, however, looked closely at the guest. Afterwards, she said he had done her a great honor by inviting her, but she decided her place was here. He stood up and said he knew what they were thinking. Afterwards, he grabbed the girl by the hair and said that he wasn't used to giving in so easily. They should remember what they had just said and done. They would regret destroying themselves with their petty stubbornness. The angry protagonist asked him to let the girl go, as she didn't like it. He threw her aside. After that, He walked out the door, ordering everyone to get out of his way. The upset girl on the floor decided she was in trouble. The protagonist confirmed that this was indeed the case. A month later, some people arrived at the guild. The employees discussed who had arrived this time, but they had no idea who it was. It was the leader of the Adventurers Guild. He asked the protagonist if he liked the southern lands. There were many young girls on the beaches there. Jirold didn't understand him. He replied that he had a reputation as an excellent specialist and probably understood where he was going with this. He replied that he had heard that he had defied the Archduke. He had made an enemy of one of the most powerful nobles in the land, all for the sake of a minor guild official. Jirold quickly replied that he had only been trying to protect his people. The man remarked on the irony. The Duke had told him that if they continued to help him, they would lose their guild positions. Many influential people had tried to influence him. They had come to the conclusion that they wouldn't stand in his way just to protect him. His face was extremely serious as he spoke. She was surprised when Alicia left the room. So she asked why she was in his room and why she was dressed like that. Alicia didn't answer and asked what was wrong with Suzu. The protagonist understood everything. To some extent, they had been preparing for this. The Adventurers Guild headquarters in King's Landing had strong ties to the nobility. In such a situation, it was impossible to make decisions that might anger a member of the royal family. The man added that, as the head of the Adventurers Guild, he was announcing the transfer, handing him the paper. He added that he was transferring him to the Adventurers Guild on Artilia Island in the southern part of the continent. Later, Alicia said she'd heard of such an island. The girls listened attentively. They studied its location on a map relative to their city. It was uninhabited, but 5 years ago, a dungeon was discovered there, and a guild was founded. The area seems to have a mild climate year-round. Suzu said it was a wonderful island and asked if there were any entertainment options. Lily said she didn't want to appear so happy. Suzu replied that it was because they'd decided to move. It would be better to gather information about their destination in advance. But Lily screamed at her not to tell her how to live. Alicia said that if the dungeon had appeared recently, she was sure there would be more talk about it. He replied that he thought it was because it was too far from the mainland. There are no regular raids in the dungeon, and transporting items from the vault is too expensive. If rare items dropped, it might be worth it. But judging by the documentation, the items dropped are of low quality. It seemed the area around this dungeon was still unexplored. He didn't think they'd want him to have a place to entertain himself. He was going to move on and leave this city. With his face downcast and his hand in front of him, he said that they were saying goodbye. The girls literally froze, saying nothing in response. The girl became distracted and said they were walking in the city and talking to her on the street. Then she went to a grocery store to buy some groceries, and when she returned, she was met with a shocking sight. After which Suzu said she understood. If that's what Uncle wanted, she'd see him off. It was sad, but the three of them could do nothing but wait for him to return. So she suggested the girls stay home. The girls realized she was simply trying to get out of it. For some reason, she thought they were reading her mind. Alicia said Jirold had disappointed her. All he had to do was tell her. He should have simply asked if she wanted to go with him to the southern islands. The man looked embarrassed at first, then turned away, saying he couldn't say that. Lily screamed that she was going too. It was her fault he'd been sent there, so she was taking responsibility and marrying him. The girls looked at her in confusion. Suzu said that, as they clung to each other that rainy day, he told her he would always be there for her. Jirold replied that he didn't know if that was the right thing to say. Alicia questioned his words. The man sheepishly replied that it was just work, prompting Lily to ask if he meant it was strictly business. She then suddenly tripped, and the man caught her, asking if she would go with him to the countryside. She didn't have to become his wife to go with him. She blushed and replied that it wasn't necessary. Meanwhile, Suzu interrupted their embrace, asking what they were talking about. Alicia came up behind him and said she was his fiancée, or whatever she was to him. She would follow him even to hell. He said he was scared. Suzu added that they were adventurers, so there wouldn't be any problems if they left town for a while. But she wondered what Lily would do with her job as a secretary. The girl replied that she was thinking of asking for a transfer. Transferring personnel between headquarters and the guild would require headquarters approval. Given the Duke's pressure, she doubted they would grant the go-ahead. The men grabbed the girl on their backs and placed her in a horse-drawn cart. After a while, they arrived at the scene, and the girl reported that it had happened here. She wondered what they should do. The man smelled a scent. Leaning back in her chair, Suzu replied that she was sorry to say it, but she seemed to have dropped out of the love race. But she firmly declared that she would follow them and come too. Seagulls were flying peacefully in the port, and many people had gathered. Standing on the deck of the ship, Lily watched the birds fly by, holding her hat. She said the wind was good, a really good start. Suzu said she couldn't believe she was sick. The protagonist said he was sending her on sick leave. They'd thought of everything. Local guild leaders have the right to grant vacation time to employees. Suzu noticed that Lily was getting smarter and smarter. She replied that she wondered who deserved the credit. The protagonist said that satisfying their request was his last job in the city. The girl replied that they would return soon. Alicia added that she'll also have fun on the southern islands, where there are almost no guilds. But it might not be easy. The protagonist was eagerly awaiting this. It was time for them to depart for the island of Artilia. The entire company was aboard the ship. They were heading together to the island of Artilia. It was small, in the southern part of the continent, stretching from north to south. This is the estate of a noble family, until recently uninhabited. 5 years ago, a dungeon was discovered in the center of the island, and the Adventurers Guild took part in its exploration. They say the island enjoys a mild and pleasant climate year-round. Considering all these natural conditions, you might think the island is developing well. But things aren't quite that simple. It was Suzu's fragrant herb, a substance forbidden for open trade in the Adventurers Guild, a sleeping potion obtained from a specific creature in the dungeon. Alicia suggested they split up. There are currently no reports of any significant achievements on the island, and it sometimes seems as if the guild branch doesn't even exist there. One reason for this is the island's desolation. A group of people were on the ship's deck, each minding their own business. Suzu was upset and said she was already tired of the ship's journey. She added that she was tired of the monotonous landscapes outside. Alicia agreed. 10 days had already passed since they had stepped aboard the ship. After that, they would need to transfer to another ship and sail another 4 days to their destination. Clearly, they were already very far from the city or the kingdom. They had already played every card game imaginable, so they were wondering how to while away the time. Suzu would like something unexpected to happen, so they can conduct a kind of detective investigation where the passengers gradually become exhausted with doubts and suspicions. The suspect's motives, revealed by the master detective, are the relationships between people. This was very exciting for her and never gets boring. The protagonist said he didn't want any extra trouble. Alicia asked who the detective would be, but the girl replied that she would be the detective. They decided together that this would be the end for them all. Lily noticed that detectives were a bad influence on her. Jirold asked her what she was reading. Lily said detective novels were all the rage these days. Suzu suddenly thought she saw one of the men glance at her, thinking he was up to something. She ran up to him, clutching her head, and asked if she could ask a few questions, since she was conducting an investigation. The man was stunned. Lily had dragged her along, saying she was so bored she'd started imagining herself a detective. She apologized to the man, but they were stopped. But the man told her she would go with him. He told Lily to use the hotel phone to call the security guards and tell them what was happening, then to stay in her room. She wanted to go too, but he was against it. The protagonist asked to see the man. He hoped they could talk directly and asked if he agreed with him. The man adjusted his cap while the girls were perplexed. Alicia noticed he'd been following them for a long time, photographing and eavesdropping. The protagonist added that they didn't feel threatened, so they continued to hover around them. Suzu was outraged that he was taking on the role of detective. He offered to introduce himself, although he could skip this prelude if he wished. The man said they had insulted the Grand Duke. He introduced himself as Hatton. He worked as a reporter for a small magazine. He was pleased to meet them. The girls found him suspicious. He laughed and confirmed their words. It was just a routine job, where he collected gossip that people found interesting and then wrote about it. The protagonist didn't think they would find him interesting as a topic for an article. The journalist thought otherwise. There are many who dislike the Duke, and now someone brave enough to antagonize him has appeared. Jirold said he doesn't like the way some people are sneaking around, so there's no need to cover the story with bias. They have nothing to hide. The reporter thanked her for her cooperation and asked if he could write a photo from close up. Alicia asked if he would come with them. He confirmed her words He also added that such a beautiful woman as she was another reason to take a photo. The heroine makes a splash at a party in King's Landing, then runs off to an island with a middle-aged man. It would be a sensation. The girl responded that it was offensive. He then offered to take a photo for the article. The girls immediately gathered around the main character. The reporter asked him to change his expression, asking what face he used when he contradicted the Duke. A simple smile would suffice. He replied that Suzu was an adventurer and had failed, so he didn't think she could handle them. She reluctantly agreed. He also noticed that Lily was very beautiful and envied him for having two such beauties. After that, he began asking him embarrassing questions, which left the girls extremely indignant. Without thinking, Suzu jumped on him, telling him he was getting on her nerves. She grabbed him, but he couldn't understand what was happening. She then twisted his neck, suggesting he rest. She then jumped off, and he fell to the floor. She said she had strangled him. Looking at him closely, she wondered if she'd overdone it. For a while, she'd considered herself a great detective, but she'd turned out to be a criminal. The protagonist told her not to worry. They'd just gotten lucky. But after that, they should stop joking, because they don't know what's wrong with this man. The girl screamed that she couldn't stand him because he thought ill of Girolamo. Alicia said she didn't like it when people spoke badly of him. But if it was true, she didn't mind. She added that she didn't care what order it was in. As long as he respected his wife, nothing else mattered. After this, the girls began arguing among themselves, trying to figure out who was who to the protagonist. He thought it was just aristocratic pretensions. He didn't need anything like that. But suddenly he wondered what might be going on between them. He was brought out of his thoughts by a hand that grabbed his shoulder. Frightened, he asked the sailor how he could help. He said he heard a loud noise and went to investigate, wondering why the man was lying on the floor. Suzu replied that he was feeling unwell because of the curse and wanted to go home. As she tied him up, she added that she wanted him taken back to the port where he'd come from. He didn't understand why she was doing this. She added that she thought the curse wouldn't lift for another day or two. As he left, he asked them to leave it to them. Alicia added that they would do everything in their power to save her. Lily asked them again to try. It would be better to put it in a warehouse or somewhere else. The protagonist handed in the money and said he'd need it for the return trip. The man counted the money and said he would make sure he returned home. They conversed among themselves and realized they were now accomplices. Meanwhile, the ship approached the city. They transferred to another vessel, which told them that boats usually didn't sail to the island. The only people who tried to reach the island were merchants who brought supplies once a month. It had been a long time since anyone other than merchants had ever arrived. A group of people disembarked at the pier, looking around. The protagonist said he thought it was hard to expect civilized life on this island. At that moment, a girl ran up to them, asking who they were. They thought she was from the guild on the island. The girl was clumsy and tripped over rocks several times along the way. The man decided to help her up. He confirmed where they came from, and she greeted them. Afterward, she fell to the ground again, seeing his face. She had long ears. He realized it was a beast man, the kind you rarely see in King's Landing or the city. The girl, worried about her, stood up and explained that she fell at least 100 times a day. She introduced herself as Roach, the island's guild leader. Suzu remarked that even someone so clumsy could join the guild. She replied that, in fact, she was the only member, so she had become the leader under duress. From now on, he will serve as his deputy. He extended his hand and said that it was just an introduction. She replied that a leader should have self-respect, but he didn't understand. The protagonist and Alicia fled to the city. They sensed the girl's perfume. Alicia said she didn't think King's Landing was as safe as it seemed. She feared there might have been an attempt on Miss Lily's life. Afterwards, he asked why she was dressed like that, since it wasn't a uniform. She explained that it was too hot on the island in regular clothes, so it was easier to stay like this, and asked if she needed to change. The man cleared his throat and sheepishly replied that she could stay like that. It was fine, it was hot. Behind him, the girls looked at him, angry. Alicia said they needed to show off more, and Lily decided to dress more revealingly, too. Suzu agreed. Jirold asked them to be quieter. Roche asked who they were. The girls introduced themselves. Lily said she worked as a guild secret agent in the city. She hoped to contribute to the island's guild's development. Roche was delighted to be colleagues, and looked forward to working together. Jirold wondered if he hadn't officially resigned. Roche said their situation might have been a bit cramped. They asked her to take them on a short tour of the island, which they agreed to. As they walked along the path, they looked around carefully. Lily noticed she couldn't see anyone. The protagonist said he thought there were about 100 residents here. Roche replied that there were currently fewer than 50, most of them fishermen, so they could be at sea right now. He realized that was fewer than the report indicated. Alicia wondered why no one went into the dungeon, adventurers, for example. They told her they only had one at the moment. This left everyone perplexed. They arrived at a dilapidated house where the girl announced they'd arrived at the island's Adventurers Guild. Everyone literally froze in shock. He was surprised by her words, and she replied that Lily was the daughter of a middle-class nobleman and had been noticed at a recent party by the Grand Duke Gasparni, a member of the royal family. She had been asked to serve him. Lily asked if she worked there. Alicia remarked that it was enough for one person. Suddenly, they began to miss their city. Next, they arrived at the island's dungeon. Alicia realized the guild had been built next to it, which they decided was more convenient. Jirold remarked that he'd like to see what was inside right away. Roche asked if they were going today. She offered to first take him to the building where they would be staying. They must be tired from the journey, so it was best to get some rest. The girls looked at the building and realized it, too, was in disrepair. Suzu didn't think it was much different from the guild. Lily wondered if she could live here. However, they arrived at a well-built mansion with several floors. Roche said it was the largest building on the island, a real mansion. Lily remarked that it looked very different from the guild. Roche replied that it was built by the nobleman who owned the island, Viscount Ushira, to be precise. But as soon as he realized the local dungeon wouldn't be profitable, he immediately left. So the guild was able to buy the house cheaply. They were very lucky, but there was no chance they'd be able to pay the interest for this year. Jirold asked if the building would be put up for auction in that case. The girl replied that everything would be fine. No one would buy property in such a remote place. Suzu realized the former guild leader was a tough nut to crack. The financial situation was dire, to say the least. What was the point of an adventurer's guild if there was only one adventurer? But as long as there was a dungeon, there had to be a guild. A man came out and asked if they were the guild's new workers. He carried all their belongings from the beach inside. Roche thanked him for this. Jirold asked who he was. She said he had kindly agreed to become the mansion's security guard. The girl in the bed was showing him her clothes, telling him they looked unusual. He asked her what was wrong, and she was acting too aggressively towards him. But she replied that it was all his fault. She refused at first, but he's royalty, so it's no surprise they're trying to kidnap her. But they don't know for sure it was him. He introduced himself as Joni. He's not just a security guard, but also does all the physical labor. He used to work as a fisherman on the mainland, but had to quit because of his age. He had nowhere else to spend his time and energy, so he came here. The men greeted each other. The protagonist thought this old man was better than the 7 young men. He sensed a kindred spirit in him, and his face didn't intimidate him. Suzu became intrigued by the atmosphere between them. Roche informed them that almost all the rooms on the 2nd floor were available. They could choose the one they liked. Dinner was still being prepared, so they could unload their bags and wait a bit. They began to explore the mansion. In the room, the man noticed that everything was clean and tidy, spacious enough to relax. He lay down on the bed and thought that when he saw the guild building, he was already preparing to spend the night in the open air, but they had ended up far away. Later, they gathered in the dining room and marveled at the feast prepared for them. Various dishes and cutlery were set on the table. Everyone began to take their seats. Roche took the glass and said everything was delicious. They could eat to their heart's content. They realized it was a very rich aroma. At that moment, a girl arrived and asked if everything was to their liking. Roche called her Lila and said it was a good job, explaining to everyone that she had prepared everything. She bowed and said that she was the mansion's maid. They could call her Lila. Looking at them, she added that she would be honored to serve the new guild leader, Mr. Jirold. She had small ears. The girls smiled back, thinking that she was a woman again, and that she too was a beast human. The protagonist noticed that she had excellent manners. It even seemed to him as if they were at a nobleman's reception. She replied that she had previously worked at one of the capital's estates, where she had received first-class training. For some reason, she had been present at the founding and was later hired here as a housekeeper, and the people who attempted her assassination apparently didn't know what she looked like. But if they were royalty, they should know what they were doing. Either way, they were going to save her. In fact, they had hired a few maids, but the guild wasn't making any money, so they were sent home. Rush noticed there was a cook, too, but he had to be fired for embezzlement. Jirold realized they were starting to complain about their lives. He said he thought a cook wouldn't be necessary with such a skilled maid. It was delicious. They apologized for putting so much work on her. He added frankly, so as to avoid any misunderstandings. Leela said she had no complaints about working here. No matter how hard it was, serving them was her duty and her joy. Simply put, she was happy with everything. Roche was touched by these words and threw herself into their arms. However, she couldn't catch it, falling to the floor. The protagonist, taking a sip from his glass, said that now they, too, needed to show their enthusiasm. The next day, they decided to go to the dungeon. Late at night, one of the girls walked down the corridor toward a closed door. The maid woke her up and asked what had happened. Lily replied that she had woken up to go to the bathroom, was already returning, and thought her room was there. Lila replied that it wasn't so. That was Mr. Girolamo's room, and hers was at the other end. Suddenly, she was told it was a wonderful piece of work. Alicia stood before her, looking at her tensely. She remembered her name and asked her to move away from the door, as she was about to begin a new battle with the master. Everyone literally froze in place. Leela asked again what it was. She couldn't let her do bad things. Alicia sheepishly replied that they were going to play cards or something like that. The maid said she thought such a lady could come up with a better excuse, which greatly embarrassed her. Suzu said they were all useless. Those two were the weakest of the four heavenly queens who loved their uncle. Alicia was surprised that Lily was from a noble family. She said she admired the adventurers who used to live in a city. She never became one herself. After this, she rushed forward at the girls, saying that she could not be stopped. However, the maid grabbed her and threw her over her shoulder. The girl fell to the floor and screamed. Lily and Alicia were afraid for her and asked if she was okay. She replied that she wasn't in any pain. The maid noted that she didn't mean to brag, but she was also trained in self-defense. After that, she calmly added that she would ask them not to make any noise in this mansion or in the mansion. Suzu said that the maid was very strong. Standing up, she added that she still had to go. Lila couldn't understand where such determination came from. The girl replied that it was because her uncle was waiting for her. However, the other girls began to protest, saying he was waiting specifically for them. The maid remained confused, not understanding who they were talking about. At that moment, the protagonist left. He adjusted his glasses and said irritably that they had to get up early tomorrow and should go to bed. They began discussing this among themselves, remembering that they had to go to the dungeon the next day. Lily confirmed that she, too, needed to get up and see them off. The protagonist didn't understand, as she, too, would be leaving with them tomorrow. They would all go on this foray into the dungeon together. This shocked her. The next day, as the dungeon was leaving, the protagonist asked if everyone had remembered the information about the dungeon. The girls replied that they'd gone through all the paperwork, top to bottom, because the cruise had been boring. Lily also added that she was completely prepared. All the girls were gathered and had their weapons ready. Lily also added that she would be a burden to them in the dungeon, so she asked them to at least let her carry her things. Suzu responded that she was being too serious, but she couldn't give up and decided to follow the adventurers. The girl replied that she understood everything. Suddenly, someone shouted at them to stop. Alicia said she didn't need to worry so much. The difficulty level of this dungeon was fairly low, and they didn't have much to carry. But she insisted she wanted to be of assistance. The protagonist said that in that case, he would entrust her with the provisions. But her main task would be to verify the veracity of the records compiled about a year ago. He handed her a scroll. Afterwards, he asked if she could handle it, to which she happily replied yes. After that, they set out, walking one after the other through the dungeon. The man lit their way. The dark dungeon was quite long. According to Roche, the only adventurer on the island was already somewhere in the dungeon. If so, since there are only 5 floors here, they'll meet soon. Suzu suddenly screamed, pointing her finger, indicating she could already see something. There was a huge slime ahead. She told her uncle it was his chance to see something unusual. She'd give in to it for a while, and then he'd save her. Although she'd never seen slimes that could do what she imagined. But Alicia didn't share her opinion, having destroyed the monster. Suzu was displeased that she didn't want to participate. Lily thought it was surprising. She hadn't even seen the girl draw her sword. She saw again how skilled she was. At that moment, giant worms emerged from the ground before them. Lila screamed, but Alicia deftly destroyed them. After that, she carefully adjusted her hair. Suzu asked her for help with the other monsters, but she replied that it was her problem. She said it couldn't be helped. After all, sometimes you have to show off, and she readied her daggers. She began quickly dispatching her opponents, much to Lily's admiration. They arrived at some kind of archway leading underground. The monsters were very weak. They were already on the 3rd floor. At this rate, they'd reached the end. Jirold marveled at them. A group of people stood before them and informed them that the path was closed for a while. They should turn around and leave. At that moment, one of them noticed Alicia. He suddenly noticed that Lisa was very tired and rubbing her forehead. So he suggested taking a break, since they were already way ahead of schedule. So far, everything was as it should be. A simple dungeon. It said average adventurers could do it in 3 hours. Even newbies could figure it out. There were no nasty types like goblins. After all, monsters with high intelligence are dangerous. They asked Lily what had happened. At that moment, she was crying, and they couldn't understand why. The girl herself couldn't understand it either. Perhaps it was from joy. Exploring a dungeon with such powerful adventurers was like a dream come true. After a while, they arrived in a large hall. They carefully examined everything around them, gradually eliminating the monsters. While looking at the papers, Lily suddenly tripped and fell, screaming. The girls were frightened and asked what had happened to her. She replied that she was looking at the dungeon map, saw a mistake, tried to fix it, and tripped. The protagonist said he'd assigned her this job, but she needed to watch her surroundings too. Her health and safety were her top priority. The girl apologized with a serious expression, adding that she would be more careful in the future. The others looked at her. Alicia said that when something needed to be written down, she should speak up so they could ensure her safety. Lilia responded affirmatively. Jirold said he'd see what happened next. Once they were done with the paperwork, they could come. Alicia asked what she wanted to fix. Lily said the 2 areas were mixed up, and the shortcut to their current location hadn't been mapped yet. The cartographer must be tired, because the dungeon was too boring. The protagonist realized that taking her into the dungeon was the right decision. But he still pondered the strength of the monsters that would appear here. Suddenly, a rat pounced on him. One said he'd seen her face on the guild poster and admired her long legs. Another said she was a nice girl, a model, and a big adventurer. The protagonist deftly dodged her, preventing her from hitting him. She eventually landed on the ground, and he continued to look around. This dungeon is on par with the 1st floor of the city's dungeon, if not lower. He thinks it could be said to be the simplest of them all, registered with the guild. But perhaps this very simplicity could be its defining characteristic. Suddenly, he saw an intriguing room with an open ceiling. He thought it was beautiful, but then he sensed a human presence and the scent of an animal. He wondered if something had happened to the adventurer. Peering behind a rock, he saw a girl swimming. She said it was rare to see people here, so she was scared. She asked if he was the guild leader who had arrived on the island yesterday. She was struck by his enthusiasm for exploring the dungeon. She introduced herself as an adventurer from the island. Her name was Christy, and she soaked in this spring almost every day. She asked if she was truly beautiful. The embarrassed man handed her a towel and suggested she get dressed first. She thanked him, but at that moment someone attacked him. A dog was barking at him, and the girl said it was just her dog. His name was Ken. The man, who was very close at the time, said it was a very common name, and that he was surprised, after which he jumped away from her and apologized, and she asked him not to worry, since she was the one who showed him such a body. She also asked if he was interested. He was indignant at her words, and replied that she was as beautiful as the waters of this spring shining in the dark dungeon. The girl looked at him intently, and he added sheepishly that, of course, even if he was telling the truth, it was not very pleasant to hear it from an old man. A woman among them slapped them and told them to be quiet. She knew Alicia too well. Some provincial adventurer with a pretty face. She made eyes at some city magnate and became so sweet and fashionable. However, she suddenly approached him, asking what he was going to do. At that moment, a cry was heard, asking if he was okay as they had heard an animal cry. The girls approached the lake, admiring how beautiful it was. They began to look around, trying to find the main character. They saw him sitting on the ground, petting a dog. They realized it was a puppy. But Alicia didn't believe it, marveling at the dog in the dungeon. She was struck by how cute he was. They started petting him, telling him he was a good boy. Alicia had strange thoughts, but she didn't want them to come up with a weird soundtrack for her. Suzu asked if she was jealous, to which she replied that she wasn't at all. The girl said she was planning to order dog ears and a tail from the capital, and Alicia asked for another one. Suddenly, someone's voice said that the dog liked the boss. It was an adventurer who came, laughed and said that he needed to be told that 3 young girls had arrived at once, and their island would flourish. They looked at her again with a smile, but thought it was a woman again. The protagonist asked Christy why she worked there. It was clear from her that she already knew this dungeon inside out. There were no valuable materials here, no way to test herself. So he didn't see the point of staying here. She replied that she'd been to many places in her life. She considered this level of difficulty was quite sufficient for daily exercise, and the island was warm year-round. The place was perfect for an adventurer planning her retirement. He replied that it was interesting information, but he still didn't allow himself to be put down so drastically. She laughed and decided to ask, too. She was curious about what he planned to do on this island. Suddenly, an idea occurred to her. She walked up to her and added that she would let her in for free, but only after she punched her in the face. He replied that he wanted people to come here to seek adventures from their own world. Whether it was a dream or reality, they would find out later. She said that when she heard that a new leader was being sent to this wilderness, she imagined a man without ambition. But she was wrong. If she could help him in any way, she asked him to contact her. Perhaps, as an experienced adventurer on this island, she could be of use to him. Afterwards, she said goodbye to them and left. Lily said she was very beautiful, with the charm of a mature woman. Alicia said she was the very picture of sophistication and asked the man if he liked women like her too. The protagonist noticed their words were surrounded by thorns. Suzu, meanwhile, lay calmly on the ground. Later, the man strolled along the beach. He met Alicia, who said the sea was very beautiful. He asked if she'd rested. They hadn't been underground for a long time, and they were definitely feeling tired. She replied that it was just like Christy had said, light exercise, although Lily was tired and fell asleep. He replied that it wasn't surprising, since they had made her work hard. She noticed that he was kind. He kept wondering how to make sure Lily, who wasn't much of an adventurer, wouldn't be alone. This was only possible thanks to the local dungeon. He figured that with professionals to accompany her, even someone of her caliber would be safe. In the city, for example, this would be difficult to guarantee. But there are no monsters here that inflict poison or other debuffs. Therefore, the likelihood of losing your life is extremely low. Thus, he became convinced that this dungeon could help those unaccustomed to adventure. At that moment, the girl asked him to look somewhere. At that moment, Alicia couldn't take it anymore and slapped her across the face. She was shocked by what she was about to do to her, so she asked if she should continue. She added that work shouldn't be discussed on dates. He replied that, actually, he was there, exploring the island for work. They saw a hut standing right in the sea. There was a very wide, shallow area there. In that case, it would be possible to build houses without cutting down trees. Alicia suggested imagining how wonderful it would be to open your eyes in the morning and see the sea. So she suggests building a villa there and living together. The mansion is nice too, but a dangerous guard lives there. The man laughed and added that it really was wonderful to enjoy the sea view for as long as one lives. She remarked that doing this next to a beautiful companion was too good to be true, to which he replied. After that, she pulled herself closer to him. She said they had a wonderful vacation ahead of them, but he replied that there was still a lot of work to do. A man came out of the hut asking what had happened and who had come. He saw the chief, who asked if it was his house. He replied that he had built it well, making it so that a small boat could dock on the side. The protagonist asked if it was possible to build even more. The man replied that it was possible, of course, but we needed materials and labor. The protagonist suggested discussing it later, and he clarified what he was planning. After all, he also worked for the guild, so he reported to it. Jirold said he was the head of the island's Adventurers Guild. After introducing himself, he proposed a meeting to discuss their work. The woman ordered the bandits to deal with her. They charged, and she began to counterattack. At that moment, they noticed that the protagonist had already fled. First, Their long-term goal will be, it may sound trivial, the development of the guild. And to achieve this, their first task is to establish the local dungeon as a beginner-friendly location. Since it has an extremely low difficulty level, it should become a place for equally weak adventurers to gain experience. They will position it as a dungeon ideal for an expedition for those just finishing their training. The low survival rate among newcomers is a long-standing problem. He too worked on a solution as a branch leader. But still, leading adventurers by the hand isn't the guild's job. Each of them wants to forge their own path. That's why this dungeon has no downsides. You can easily gain experience on the spot. You can test the strength of your bonds with your fellow trainees. Even if you fail completely, the chances of losing your life are minimal. You can try again. And when you succeed, you'll gain confidence in your abilities. He suggests this, in part, for various reasons. He'd seen countless young men who misjudged their own strength and disappeared. He'd also seen those who'd fallen into despair after losing a comrade. It was painful for an old man like him to watch. An adventurer doesn't necessarily have to strive for the end. Even taking small but steady steps can bring you closer to your dream. He learned this from experience. Roche asked him about his experience, but he'd said he was talking about his friend. Suzu replied that adventurers should live long and work hard for the guild. He replied that she'd misunderstood. Alicia agreed with his plan and was willing to act as a guide. Lily added that if they had such a guide, she thought the newcomers would be delighted. Suzu decided to join her. Such a simple dungeon lacks thrills, so she will add traps to increase the adrenaline a little. He didn't understand her, she added, adding that he wasn't making any advances toward her at all. Therefore, she was plagued by doubts about whether he wanted to contact her. On the day she was courting him, she was in a good mood. He apologized to her. He remembered her words about taking care of it. After all, she was in a bad mood. She had just had an uninteresting situation with him. Lily noticed that her expression was too angry. Jirold said that if she did this in another dungeon, it could become a serious hindrance. But as a training method, it might be suitable. He folded his hands in front of him and added that now they needed to decide on their next goal. He decided to turn the island into a resort. The girls were shocked by this word, and Christy assumed he meant that the dungeon wasn't the most important thing. The protagonist confirmed her words. Explore the dungeon in the morning and stroll along the beach at night, enjoying the starry sky. As far as he knows, there are no other places like this. Retired adventurers, as well as active ones, tired of high-level dungeons. For such people, this island could be a great vacation spot, and they usually have plenty of money saved up. Roche asked him to wait. She said the guild didn't have the money to build a resort or anything like that. Jirold said she was right, but he'd figure it out somehow. He wasn't planning on building a luxury hotel right away. For starters, the most basic buildings for overnight stays would be enough. He asked Jian about the matter they'd been discussing. He said he thought the island's wood would be sufficient for materials. Local fishermen have agreed to help, so labor is no problem, and he knows a construction specialist. However, no one will work for free. The protagonist stood up and announced that he'd decided what they'd do first. First, they needed to rewrite all the documentation for the local dungeon, sending a request to the beginner training center. Everyone who was available was to assist the builders. That was all. He would discuss the details with each of them individually if necessary. He apologized to Lily and Roche for bothering them. They should gather all the documents they had and bring them to the living room. They agreed. So she'll distract them as long as possible. He told her not to worry about it. But he's most worried about Suzu. He told Liliet to use the mansion's first floor for a while to receive visitors and for other guild work. He asked if she was okay with it. She replied that he simply had to give the order. Now she works for him and will do whatever he asks. After that, she approached him and straightened his tie. He replied that he understood, but she added that if he planned to use certain rooms in a special way, she could change the decor as desired. He replied that he would let her know if he decided anything. It was raining outside. They had some free time, so Alicia suggested Suzu go back to the dungeon. But she said she had important business to attend to. As she climbed the stairs, she yawned and said that she had been woken up early in the morning and wanted to sleep. The girl understood her. Roche entered the living room and said she had brought all the documents she could hold. The man thanked her for it. She added that he was an amazing leader. Coming up with a way to profit from a guild that even a main branch had abandoned had actually boosted her motivation. She laughed and said she hadn't succeeded. He replied that he didn't yet know whether this was a good plan or not. But sometimes an adventurer has to push through. Even for a guild, this is a necessary skill. After all, their audience is adventurers, and the dungeon defies all common sense. It often happens that instead of resigning yourself to it and simply waiting for it to end, you have to resist as hard as you can, even if it seems like everything is wrong. They're in the same situation. She said he's very strong. Compared to him, she, who had become the head because she had never been, was not very good. He agreed with her, adding that they were different. At that moment, she was lying unconscious on the table, and someone was shouting that it wasn't the same one. They had to catch the half-elf. A maid came in and said that Madame Roche, even after the rest of the staff had fled, continued to work single-handedly to keep the guild running. And she couldn't be called lazy. She guarantees it, because she was there the whole time. The girl's arrival surprised the secretary. The man said he didn't blame her. He thinks her sense of responsibility and character are at least better than the previous leaders, since she didn't run away. And he believes he truly saw her trying. He simply wanted to point out that the amount they'd accumulated over the years differed. There was no point in lamenting such a difference. For example, did she remember how he'd said he'd figure out the money needed to develop the island? The girl remembered that he had indeed said that. He replied that he was going to use his own funds and asked if she could afford it. She shook her head and said that was impossible. She hadn't received her salary for several months. Then she asked him if he was rich. He replied that he'd simply saved up money little by little over the 20 years he'd worked for the guild. Now she must understand that she can't do what he can. But she doesn't need to. The time will come when he finds something she excels at. The girl asked if she should simply work hard and wait for that day. He put his hand on her shoulder and told her she was right. For now she could rely on him. She replied that she would try to learn from him. He added that she wouldn't have time to rest, and that he was in for a tough fight until he ran out of money. She replied that it sounded terrible. Lily was listening to them at the time. She thought everything would be fine with them, too. After that, she decided to ask if she could come in, since she was having a hard time. Everyone turned their heads in her direction. The days flew by in the blink of an eye. The man said they were scouting the area near the hotel. She said she was Lily. The man in the cloak ordered them to leave and cover their tracks. They were constantly busy with various matters, consulted among themselves, and received messenger birds that carried messages. The sun shone brightly in the sky. The men gathered in the forest, pointing out certain trees. Alicia, meanwhile, was busy chopping with her sword. They all worked together, splitting the logs, loading them into the cart, cutting them into boards, while the girls made them snacks. They were gathering on the seashore, surrounded by building materials they had made themselves. The protagonist looked up at the sky and said he thought it was very hot today, too. Construction is progressing well. The results of their appeal to the newcomer centers are still pending. Our response should arrive soon. There was no point in rushing, though. There was still a lot to prepare. At that moment, Roche ran past, calling him. He asked why so suddenly, since it was his day off. The girls said they'd received a letter from the adventurer school. They were ready to send students to the island. They were very pleased about this. Specific dates were also given. 6 people would arrive in 15 days, but he wasn't sure if they would be able to accommodate them. He stated that they needed to prepare to receive guests. Roche couldn't believe everything was going so well. He replied that it was just the beginning. Then he looked away. He noticed her outfit was different today. She said it was hotter than usual. It was a swimsuit you could jump into the sea in at any moment. Everyone wears ones like that back home. Suddenly, someone tugged at his arm. He thought about handing her over to the Archduke, who was simply obsessed with her. He thought he'd be remembered and promoted after that. He slammed the boxes on the floor in irritation. The girls told him they hadn't been swimming since arriving on the island. Their expressions were extremely indignant. There's such a beautiful sea nearby, and they just work and work. The girls were completely in agreement, so he suggested they all go for a swim together. And then he thought about how his colleagues had invited him in his youth. But he wasn't particularly keen, trying to figure out if it was fun. But the girls quickly grabbed him, starting to undress him, asking him to tell them everything. Suzu said that when you bathe, you need to oil your naked body. He replied that he didn't know that. Roche was shocked, not understanding what they were doing. In the dungeon, Monsters were running toward the humans. The girl said they were spotted by 5 giant rats. The boy said he and Lucia would hold them off, and Carlo should cast a spell. They immediately began fighting their opponents, realizing they were faster than they thought. The leader told Carlo to use magic. He used Burning Blast. It was a dead hit on several monsters, but he missed 2 and 1 was unharmed. And the leader said it was great because he'd scared them. After that, they continued attacking them, using swords and arrows. The leader himself protected them all with his shield while the others attacked. Finally, the last monster remained. They set off in pursuit, and Carlo shouted for them to stop. But they had already run into the room where the skeletons were, ready to attack. The girl fell to the ground in surprise, and the enemy was already swinging at her. She closed her eyes in horror. But at that moment, Alicia arrived and destroyed the skeletons with a single blow. She apologized for interrupting. The leader helped the girl up. He felt sorry for her. She had already awakened from the slumber of a powerful sleeping potion. He wondered how resilient the doors were. They thanked her for her help, but she said it was unwise to go down in pursuit of one monster, as they might run into other monsters. Lucia said they understood it in their heads. The leader added that they were simply in the spur of the moment, thinking everything would be fine. She replied that it wasn't very funny to hear that from a tank. Basically, an adventurer's job is simply to complete missions. Anything else is a waste of time. Especially if they're new, it's worth avoiding combat so you can escape. For example, in this quest on the 2nd level, while gathering medicinal herbs, an encounter with monsters at the gathering point is inevitable. And until then, it's best to conserve your strength. Injuries are unacceptable, so a defensive formation centered around tanks is essential. They also need to conserve spells whenever possible. For example, a wizard's explosion magic is limited to 1 cast. He confirmed it, and the tank asked how she understood it. The girl added that they still needed to discuss how best to use the team's combat resources in the dungeon. Gathering medicinal herbs is a very easy task, but they were very tired. The leader said they were able to see Ms. Alicia. Lucia added that he was very lucky. She'd only heard about her before, but she couldn't believe they were accompanied by a celebrity who's even in the Adventurers Hall of Fame. Carlo added that she's also a model. Ice Sword Princess Alicia. She's as tough as her name suggests. The student wished she'd be stricter with him. Carlo added that she'd been through so much and become successful, and he had a lot to ask. He was so nervous that he didn't remember anything she said. Meanwhile, a group of people arrived at the mansion. She said her help was on the way. He replied that they had very good people working with them. They had taken precautions, but they couldn't stay here long. But he would have time to check it out. He pulled out a small bottle. Inside, Lily thanked them for their work. She needed a request and the requested items. Tank replied that he'd done a great job. Lucia added that she did the same as everyone else. Roche asked them to wait a little while. Lily gave them money and thanked them for waiting. It was their reward for successfully completing the task. They looked at her and realized it was a simple quest. Instructor Camellia asked them how they liked the first dungeon. She was hungry, so she suggested they discuss all the details over dinner, since they were probably hungry too. She wanted to say she'd pay for everything, but this time the school would be covering accommodation and meals on the island. A large variety of dishes were placed before them. This is included in their monthly tuition fees, so they should simply enjoy it. Everyone was very pleased. She added that, however, all expenses, thanks to the guild's kindness, were very low. Therefore, they shouldn't dirty or break anything here. Everyone agreed with her. They began eating, commenting on how delicious the fish dishes were, and the meat, too. The cooks on this small island were excellent. They called the maid. She apologized for the wait and brought them drinks. Camellia said this tropical nut liqueur was delicious, and she could drink it all the time. Carla replied that she already did. Lucia shouted that she wanted some too, but they told her it wasn't included in the price, and that she'd have to pay for it herself. She told them the boys had rewards for the order, so she was asking for her share now, and asked Lila to wait a bit. The boys discussed how beautiful the maid was. They decided to go on another visit tomorrow, but today they could go to bed early to be in good shape. They'd seen the hotel during the day, but they still couldn't believe they built houses right in the water. Her hometown is also on the seashore, but it's too windy and the waves are too high to build houses like that. This potion is made from the same kind of monster as the sleeping one, only from a much rarer specimen. He dropped it into the girl's mouth. It's very valuable and must be sold to the Archduke along with Lily. Lucia felt like she was on vacation, but she'd never been there. The guy replied that if he had the money for vacations, he wouldn't have become an adventurer. Camellia said she'd heard that this place was originally built as a resort. Staying here is very expensive, so they had to try to avoid having to compensate for anything. However, after that, they couldn't sleep soundly. But everyone slept soundly that night and woke up in the morning to a bright sun. By this time, one of the guys was already swimming in the sea and said it was too cool to be in the sea for just 3 seconds. Camellia called Deluri, telling them they needed to quickly pack and head to the guild. Everyone immediately agreed. The boys were told to remain vigilant. Everything in the dungeon had to be done carefully. Suddenly, worms emerged from the ground, frightening Louis. They also attacked the wizard, knocking him to the ground. They began to fight them, but at that moment, the plant monsters attacked. Surrounded on all sides, they realized this was bad. The boys suggested retreating to the previous location as the wizard needed first aid. Lucia agreed, saying she'd clear the way for them. Ludwig decided to carry Carlo. Nina was also supposed to take on the monster. He would retreat as the opportunity presented itself. The girl began using her normal attacks. They ran quickly, shooting back at the monsters along the way. Eventually, they quickly escaped the dungeon. Alicia watched them. At the guild building, the instructor told them they were doing well. She didn't understand what had happened, thinking Louis couldn't retreat. He replied that he simply hadn't bought a recovery potion. She called him names for it. At that moment, the girl's entire body began to shake. He was amazed at the extraordinary effect just one drop had. She had ruined his plans and would pay for it. But he was no demon. He said they were very expensive. He thought that if he and Lucia did their job properly, they could defeat dungeon-level monsters and keep their items. So he only bought a first aid kit. Camellia wouldn't call it preservation because in the end, they have nothing. If this had been any other dungeon, they wouldn't have escaped so easily. Between the acidic fluids from the higher worms and the toxic plants, they'd have been stuck there for a week. They came here to test their ability to cope with the dangers of the dungeon. Did they think they were at a resort? The fact is, overconfidence often leads to the end of life, but it's good to experience it for yourself. They need to make as many mistakes as possible now while they're here. At that moment, someone called out to the boy. Carlo said he was fine and could walk on his own, so he suggested they return to the dungeon. It wasn't until noon, so they could still try to complete the quest. He looked at him and said they should be able to destroy 10 slugs in just a few seconds. The instructor called them back, but they left. Watching them go, she greeted the Guild Master. She thought it was a very good idea, a dungeon-based training program. Wouldn't it be perfect for a water-based course? She's in favor of sending newcomers on a regular basis, and will discuss this with management. She'll also work on getting letters of recommendation for other schools when she returns. She's leaving a little earlier tomorrow. After that, she'll be back in a week, so she's asking you to take care of them while she's gone. A week later, the students reached the cave where the lake was located. They marveled at how beautiful it was, and this was the deepest part of the island's underground. So we decided to show her mercy. Afterward, he used his dagger to destroy her clothes. They were able to navigate this path quite easily, although the first couple of days were tense. One was so nervous that his vision became clouded, preventing him from performing to his full potential. Alicia said she'd watch them improve every day. She thought they were a good team. Ludovic said the key was to stay calm, just like him. Lucia was genuinely surprised by how calm he was, as if he'd become a different person. He asked her again, but she replied that she hadn't said anything. They continued bickering, while Alicia stood to the side and laughed at them. Later, they gathered on the beach, deciding they could play before the boat picked them up. A joyful Lucia held a drink in her hand. Suddenly, they saw a boat already arriving, which displeased them. Louis suggested the girl earn money in other dungeons and come here next time for a vacation. She blushed and agreed. She thought the relationship would develop quickly, that there were still stages of progress. After these words, she grabbed the man and said that in such matters timing is crucial. But he understood what could happen if things continued like this. The woman screamed at them not to let her push them back. The men charged, saying she was very beautiful and would be careful with her. But they couldn't resist the leader's will. Alicia kicked him and apologized. He flew back several meters, but the others also rushed to attack. She deftly parried all the blows, attacking back. Suddenly, a brute appeared behind her, but she knocked him back with one blow. The others were shocked by this, but the leader shouted at them not to be afraid and to do it. Suddenly, a girl called out to her. She said the man who was with Alicia was missing. She wondered where he could have gone. They weren't told to do this, so they wouldn't interfere, so they could leave him alone. After that, she licked her lips and angrily said that they needed to deal with the enemy first. Meanwhile, Alicia continued to fight. Suddenly, a charge flew past her, leaving a mark on the ground. The leader said she didn't like her unkempt appearance. She thought she should do her a favor. Then she charged, screaming her name. She used a darkness cleansing strike, causing various vortexes of energy to form around her, aimed directly at Alicia. She managed to dodge, but her clothes were torn. Seeing her underwear, the leader began screaming that this was utterly shameless. Meanwhile, Alicia deftly found herself and jumped on the girl, who fell to the ground exhausted. Her assistant called out to her in fear. Alicia said she couldn't believe she was stuck here. She apologized to the protagonist for it. Now they had to rescue Suzu, who was locked in with the masked kidnapper. He added that he meant they would become a couple and that marriage would be their only path. But these words filled the girl with delight. He asked her if she was sure, becoming extremely serious. She sighed heavily. A good adventurer knows how to navigate a dungeon. But it's not every day he finds himself at a desolate crossroads like this one. So he now offers the girl some fun. Something he's never done before with someone like her. But he couldn't do anything, because at that moment the main character appeared and jumped right on his head, causing him to hit his face on the floor. The man looked closely at the girl, trying to figure out if everything was okay. Meanwhile, she lay on the table, shaking. He realized it was just in time. He was pleased and thanked her for leaving a trail of perfume. There were cigarette butts lying on a bench in front of the entrance. He suspects she may have slipped some of the strong-smelling herb into the kidnapper's pocket. He's impressed by how she managed it and suggests they get to work. Meanwhile, the girl quickly grabbed him and threw him onto the table. She said the man had given her a strange drug and now she needed help. She thought she was going crazy. The sweaty protagonist frowned at her and said he understood everything and would help her now. She looked at him. He gave her something to drink, saying it was a new type of mind-altering potion that restores sleep, clears thoughts, and cures most other mental anomalies. It's a combination of rare herbal remedies from Dungeons and Monsters. Its effectiveness has been confirmed by their development department, so she needn't worry. There's just one problem. It hasn't received the appropriate accreditation yet. The girl began foaming at the mouth, and he added that it was obviously excruciating, but it looked like it could be endured by an adventurer. Then he asked how she was feeling. She began coughing, and he began to examine the kidnapper closely. After that, she extended her hands to him and asked if he wanted her to say it. She could repeat it as much as she wanted. She was asking him to make her his wife. It was the young nobleman who had greeted Alicia yesterday. He thought his name was Rudolph. He wondered what the man was trying to do. Perhaps he acted independently or on orders from above. In any case, dealing with the nobleman was no good. They needed to leave quickly. After that, he picked up the girl and jumped out the window. A worried Lily greeted them at the estate. The protagonist said Suzu was a bit careless, so she was kidnapped. She added that she saw an opportunity and beat them all. Alicia remarked that she was truly strong. Suzu added that she just wanted to show her courage. Maybe the girl was now worried about her, but everything was fine. Lily replied that she didn't believe it. Lily asked Alicia why her clothes were so torn. She replied that it was an accident. She also noticed that the clothes were different from the ones she'd been wearing when she left. Alicia replied that she'd borrowed the clothes and would return them later, meaning she'd bought them along the way. The protagonist apologized, saying they'd have to take the bath and sweat it out. They had to leave King's Landing on the first train of the morning, so they needed to go to bed early. Everyone made excuses to go to their room, leaving her alone. Jirold sighed and said they'd managed to hide everything. Suzu added that they didn't have to worry about Lily anymore. However, Alicia didn't believe it. She added that the protagonist could take a bath with Alice as a reward. But he was outraged by her words and apologized to her, suggesting they postpone the gondola excursion. She replied that she understood. She'd had enough of King's Landing. It was pouring rain outside. 2 weeks after returning from King's Landing, the rainy season had begun. There were very few people on the streets. At the cafe, Lily asked a man if he liked the dessert. He replied that they weren't stopping work. She was interviewing a guild official. He also noticed that she hadn't been looking well lately. He noticed that she had said it very clearly, so she must understand everything. They couldn't go this far and then turn back. The girl agreed with him. It had been like this since returning from King's Landing. She had been restless for the past few days, so he wondered what had happened. She replied that she thought she was working as usual, but she received a letter from her parents in which they expressed the opinion that they wanted her to become the Archduke's secretary. It seems he spoke directly to her parents. The letter also said that if she refuses, they will disown her. She thinks this is serious. From her father's point of view, she is probably a negligent daughter. He probably believed this was the only way she could fulfill her filial duty to him. Jirold asked her if she was sure, causing her to tremble. She screamed that she couldn't do this, that she couldn't live alone, that she wasn't as strong as her friends. Everyone present noticed her scream, so she apologized and said she'd be back tomorrow, then went outside into the rain. Upon looking, she realized it was a real downpour, so she would get soaked very quickly. The protagonist grabbed her hand and told her that in this rain she would definitely catch a cold, so she should wait. He added that tears wouldn't help. That's the adventurer's mindset. She replied that she'd heard that phrase in all sorts of adventure stories. He added that, in reality, it meant being prepared to live without regret. After all, you only live once. She asked if he was preparing her for a life of loneliness, as that was pointless. But he said he wasn't alone. As long as she was an adventurer, he'd be there. She blushed and asked if it was a proposal. He said no, but she ran after him, proposing marriage. But he merely changed the subject. He ran down the street and she ran after him, trying to catch up. A bright sun appeared in the sky. She asked him what would happen with the meeting with the official. Looking at her, he thought it was the first time he'd done this, given his past life. He wasn't ready for this, but he was finally beginning to organize his thoughts. Just as he was about to, there was a sudden loud knock at the door. When they arrived, she said she wanted to stay on as secretary. He thought he was on her side. At that moment, a girl ran up to him. She asked him where they'd been. He replied that it was nothing special, that he'd been outside and asked what was going on. She replied that they had an unexpected visitor. He frowned when he saw him. The Duke said that they had met again and announced that he had come to take little Lily. The guild leader in town was asked his name. At that moment, the streets were bustling with activity, with people looking at the carriage, which was being guarded by guards. The protagonist bowed and introduced himself. Before him stood the fifth in line to the Gasvani throne and one of the most powerful men in the country. His Royal Highness doesn't visit this city every day. He wondered what the nobleman's purpose was. The man said he must have been a member of the King's Landing Guild. They asked him to second Lily to be his personal secretary. Jirold looked at him, understanding why he had come. He apologized for disturbing him. He informed her that her intentions remained the same as those expressed at the party. She wanted to continue her work as the guild secretary, and he respected her decision. Therefore, he would like to reiterate that he does not wish to discuss this matter. The Duke laughed and said he did not understand this at all. At that moment, refreshments were brought to him. He asked why they insisted on working for the Adventurers Guild in such a small town. It would be much more profitable to work for him, for royalty. The secretary noticed the guild leader's terrifying expression. The girl behind the door asked if he was inside. She urged him to open the door, but Alicia was against it. He hesitated, and Lily suddenly shouted that Suzu had been kidnapped by unknown persons. The visitor added that, in any case, Lily's wishes were disregarded. He couldn't understand how a viscount's daughter could go against the royal family. They'll have to work a little harder, and the state needs people like him. If he works hard, he could get a promotion at headquarters. He would surely get a promotion if the Duke put in a good word for him. He finished his meal and took a towel from the maid. He also said that if he was needed, he could go to the southern islands or the northern mountains. The assistant understood this as a demotion. The protagonist gestured for her to stop. The Duke added that he had a good secretary and excellent taste. But Lily was something else. She was young and fresh. The guild workers gathered in the hallway, discussing the situation. Lily approached and asked what had happened. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The secretary called her over. Meanwhile, the Duke said he was a busy man. Whatever Jirold did, she would be his secretary. So, he had to choose wisely. The protagonist told him to think about it, laughing. The Duke decided he was being disrespectful. But he shouted that he was the one being rude to him. He confidently declared that Lily was his prized subordinate, and he had no intention of handing her over to him. His face was determined. Those present were literally stunned by such behavior. At that moment, the door opened and a girl entered, calling him. The plan to create a resort on Attila Island is progressing well. Work is underway on the coast, and a vessel for transporting cargo and passengers is moored at the pier. The guild leader acknowledges the success, noting that more and more of the new arrivals have never undergone formal training. This confirms that the island's fame has spread far beyond professional circles. At the same time, the leader notes the strange behavior of some guests who have been living on the island for a month. Instead of going underground, they're simply relaxing and having fun, enjoying the resort atmosphere. The guild leader notes that young people are increasingly seeking regular jobs on the island instead of dangerous adventures. While this helps alleviate the labor shortage, he wonders where the adventurous spirit has gone. The island's transformation began with the launch of a ferry service. The new route directly connected Attila with the region, home to a major adventure training school. Simplified logistics have doubled the number of visitors. Now the island attracts not only training center graduates but also ordinary people eager to see new places. The local dungeon quickly gained a reputation as an excellent training ground. Those seeking to hone their skills in a realistic environment flock here, making the island an important training center. The influx of visitors sparked rapid development of the island's main street and an expansion of housing. Adventurers proved profitable guests. They spent generously on food and lodging, significantly accelerating the settlement's economic growth. A regular ferry service established a trade channel for distributing spoils from the dungeon. This, along with generous rewards for adventurers, gave a powerful boost to the island's economy. The guild's profits, especially from the commercial properties it controls, are steadily growing. The leader notes that the groundwork for the resort's next expansion is currently underway. During dinner, his companion notices his pensiveness and asks if he's thinking about work again. She encourages him to take a break from his work and enjoy delicious food in a pleasant setting. Workers are unloading the ship and transporting supplies to shore. They use carts and carry bales by hand, providing the island with everything necessary for construction. The hero tries to justify himself, but admits that thoughts about the project's development never leave him even at the table. Clearly, Attila's large-scale plans for transforming the city require his constant attention. The man explains that he's thinking about the island's development. The woman sitting across from him concludes that he thinks about work even while eating. A brunette with a flower in her hair calls her interlocutor a true gentleman. She notes that he handles his duties well, not letting his success go to his head. His interlocutor warns him that excessive workaholism can be harmful. However, she admits that things on the island have clearly improved since his arrival. A girl named Suzu claims his behavior is due to his status as an Ojusin virgin. The man is shocked by this remark, while the others present confirm her words. One of the girls grins at how close the group is. The man, meanwhile, merely sighs heavily and continues eating. The hero claims that the success is solely due to the island's initial potential. He admits that he himself did not expect such a favorable turn of events. The man modestly adds that it wasn't just his personal abilities. He says everything worked out thanks to the people who helped him implement his plan. The woman asks how the dish tastes. The man tries it and confirms that it's delicious. Despite the hero's modesty, the narration emphasizes the opposite. It asserts that the success achieved is indisputably due to the abilities of one specific individual. The ship's captain commends the hard work of one of the workers, who has already transported numerous people to the island. The man in the cap expresses approval of the pace and quality of the work being completed. It's explained that the key person is the maid Lira-san. The restaurant where she serves as head chef has become the most successful establishment on the entire island. Lira-san's food has captivated both adventurers and locals. Thanks to its enormous success, plans are already underway to build and open a second branch. Lira-san personally hired and trained island staff, and also brought back the maids whose contracts had been previously terminated. She now ensures the stable operation of both restaurants. Lira-san's work isn't limited to restaurants. In addition to her main job, she works as a maid at the mansion in the mornings and evenings. In her free time, she designs clothing, specifically swimsuits that are suitable for immediate use in the sea. The man takes a sip from his cup and makes a satisfied sound. He clearly appreciates the moment of relaxation. The man invites Lyra-san to sit at the table as well. She obediently agrees to his request. The hero acknowledges that her abilities have been a tremendous help to him. He notes that without her involvement, his development would have been much slower. Lyra-san listens silently to the praise, her face showing no signs of emotion. Lyra modestly replies that she was merely fulfilling her master's requests and did nothing supernatural. The man remarks in response that perhaps he demands too much of her compared to Roshan. The worker accepts the new assignment and continues loading items onto the deck. The entire process proceeds smoothly, confirming the team's readiness to undertake this large-scale project. The girl insists she was simply using her maid skills. She adds that her current success is the result of Jirold-sama's skill in utilizing her abilities. Lyra declares that the master may henceforth use her body as he pleases. Jirold is utterly shocked by this ambiguous proposal and cannot hide his surprise. Shocked, Jirold tries to justify Suzu-san's words to Lyra, explaining that she simply can't live without such jokes. However, Lyra calmly replies that she's not at all opposed to the master's decision to take more decisive action. The girl calmly sips her tea and adds that, ultimately, it's her personal preference. While the man tries to process what she's just heard, she suddenly admits she was just kidding him. Changing the subject, Lyra reminds Jiroldus of his plans for tomorrow. The man, still somewhat confused, confirms that he remembers the upcoming errands. Ra reminds himself that he needs to remember to meet someone first thing tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, the girls wonder out loud who it could be and whether it's another suitor. One of the companions wryly remarks that the struggle for the status of the Virgin Oji-san's legal wife has already descended into chaos, so she hopes the guest isn't a new girlfriend. Jirold responds by deciding that he will have to greet the visitor properly, regardless. Another girl is surprised by the news of the visit. She doesn't yet know who exactly has arrived on the island. A smiling middle-aged man appears before the heroes. He greets the young ladies and says they haven't seen each other for a long time. The bespectacled protagonist wearily wipes sweat from his brow as he stands on board a ship against the backdrop of the sea horizon. He notes that the current successes in developing the island are only the beginning, and that in the near future, the work will become even more intense and extensive. The protagonist reflects on his time as guild leader on Attila Island. It's been about 6 months since he took up the post. Life flows smoothly in this sunlit tropical paradise. He knows that the change of seasons on the island is barely noticeable, as the weather is warm year-round. However, despite the constant climate, the island's appearance has undergone significant changes over time. The protagonist stands surrounded by 2 girls, surveying the transformed landscape. There's a noticeable stir. A group of people, armed and carrying luggage, is approaching the leader. One of the elves calls out to him, addressing him respectfully. Guild leader. It seems work is in full swing, and new deeds and accomplishments await the island's inhabitants. The girl enthusiastically reports that over 100 adventurers have already visited the island this month. She shares these positive statistics with the leader, noting the significant increase in the popularity of their resort.